Hey guys and welcome back to my channel. This is part 4 of What If Naruto Was Got a Political Marriage with Temari. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and also go and support the author, link in description. Naruto was staring down the female ninja in front of him. This was the one that had most likely blown him into the trees earlier. She had a fan just like Temari's, only in a different style. He didn't know where Temari was, but this girl obviously knew, and he would make her tell him what she knew. He charged forward, making several clones as he ran at her. She smirked. She couldn't believe he would do something so careless. Was the boy an idiot or just had a death wish? She opened her fan and used it to make a large wind, blowing him and his clones away. The clones disappeared when they hit the ground, but Naruto slowly got up. He wouldn't give up and he would make her tell him the truth. He threw one of the few kunai he had left, knowing she would use her fan to get rid of them. When she drew back her fan, he went off at an angle. Now she would have to deal with the kunai or get hit by them, while she had to focus on that he would attack her on a totally different approach. She did use the wind to knock the weapons away, but with her backhand she managed to use her fan one more time. This time Naruto was thrown back into one of the large statues before hitting the ground. Well, that was better, Kimi stated as she rested her fan on the ground and leaned on it. But in order to beat a wind user, you can't come at us so directly and you have to be fast. In a one-on-one fight, you can't beat someone like me. I won't give up, Naruto said through gritted teeth as he pushed himself up. Huh, that should have broken at least one bone. Kimi looked at the boy. He should be hurting more than just that. Either she was losing her touch or the kid was tougher than normal. Then again, he did survive being buried under some trees. She opened her fan ready to finish him off when she sensed someone coming up fast behind her. Kimi managed to dodge just as Temari's kick flew past her head. Kimi turned to get her fan in use, but in close quarters it wasn't easy. Temari-chan, Naruto yelled out, seeing her. Leave this to me, Naruto. This is personal, Temari told him, not looking at him as she wanted to keep her eyes focused on her opponent. She knew that she couldn't let Kimi get any distance. Temari hadn't found her fan, so she was at a major disadvantage. Sure, with Team 7 she had been learning some combat without the fan, but it was still her preferred mode of fighting. She kept at the older woman, never letting her get any distance or time to use any technique. But she was having a hard time landing a hit on the girl too. Kimi had closed her fan and was now using it as a defensive barrier. Hitting the metal fan was like hitting a wall. She once tried for a side kick and Kimi had placed the fan in her way. Now Temari's shin hurt like hell. She was lucky she pulled at the last moment, or else she might have broken it. Kimi kept on jumping away, trying to get the distance, but Temari was right on her tail the entire time. You've improved, Kimi noted as they fought. But you still don't know everything I taught you. Kimi opened her ran, but instead of waving it around sideways, she spun it around vertically in a circle. Temari was caught by surprise when a wind shield was created. But she had her own surprise. You never taught me everything. Temari bit her thumb to draw out blood. Normally she would use another means to call on him, but thankfully there were many different ways to call forth a summon animal. She called forth Kamatari, the one-eyed weasel that carried a sickle with him. Go, Kamatari. On it, the weasel stated as he flew with tremendous speed at Kimi. The summon animal could move so quickly that most people couldn't follow him. But with Kimi's wind shield, all his strikes ended up hitting her barrier. That was fine, she planned on it to get some breathing room anyway. Now she just needed a plan of attack before Kamatari went back. She could only summon him in battle for short bursts. Naruto had watched the battle, and although he wanted to know what was going on with them, they seemed to know one another. The girl had said something about training Temari, and she was using a fan just like his wife. Was the girl from Suna? He also wished he could help, but Temari seemed really serious about fighting her alone. But she didn't have any weapons. Then he remembered what he found on the way here. He dug into his equipment bag and pulled out the 2 small battle fans. She said he couldn't help, but nothing said he couldn't at least give her back what was hers. Temari-chan, here. He threw them at her. She caught the items as they were thrown at her. At first she wasn't sure what he was doing and about to chew him out when she saw what they were. The fans he had given her as a gift. She had thought that they had taken them when she woke up, but they must have fallen off her. She smiled as Kimmy would never expect this. She quickly ran at the other girl as she saw her summon animal leaving. Well, that was a new trick, Kimmy said as she pulled her own fan back. But you never were able to beat me, Temari. It's time to end this. I would have preferred to kill your brother, but I suppose we never get what we want. Kimmy sent out a blade of air at Temari, trying to cut her in half. Temari quickly opened her fans and in a crisscross fashion created two smaller versions of the same air blade. Although Kimmy's was larger, Temari's were more accurate and cut a hole for her passage through them. Normally her larger fan would have just cancelled out the other jutsu. This way the air blade was now cut into two as it cut two paths of destruction behind her. Kimmy was surprised by this as she tried to get her fan back into position for another shot. Temari was faster though. She managed to duck under the large fan and with one swipe, cut into Kimmy's stomach with the fan in her hand. Kimmy dropped her fan as she held her stomach. She hadn't expected Temari to know a new style of fan battling. She had to admit, Temari had grown a lot since she last saw her. In a strange way she was kind of proud of that. She winced as the pain made her fall to her knees. The feel of her hot blood was covering her hands. She knew that if she pulled her hands away, her guts would spill out. She was basically dead. It only would be a matter of time now. She could die slowly as her body bled out, or she could die in a short and horrible manner seeing her guts spill out onto the floor. Temari stepped forward, knowing full well the kind of damage she had just inflicted on the older girl. Kimmy wouldn't be able to use the fan against her again, not without killing herself in trying. She felt a pain deep in her heart at the sight of this. This was something she never wanted in her life. Well, you've gotten stronger. Kimmy coughed up blood that most likely was seeping into her stomach and one lung from a small cut she bet. Do me one favor, even if for old time's sake. What? Temari asked, trying to keep her voice from cracking in seeing this. Kimmy lifted her head to look at Temari without any fear. End this, please. I don't want this to drag out. Please send me to him. I want to see him again so bad. Kimmy said as the first tears she had shed in a year finally showed on her face. Temari placed the fans on either side of her neck. Where's my fan? Second floor. Store room in the east side. You can't miss it. Kimmy said to her. I'm sorry, Temari said as her hands shook. For everything. Doesn't matter, Kimmy said as she closed her eyes and thought of her dead lover again. She so hoped she would finally be united with him again. Temari shut her eyes and gritted her teeth as she slid the fans in a crisscross pattern and put some chakra into them. They created two wind cuts that decapitated the ex-Suna ninja. Temari heard the head hit and then the body. She felt the spray of blood hit her body and she slowly forced herself to look. There laying on the ground was someone that had shaped her life. Her head and body separate, there was so much blood as the girl's heart bumped out a few more times before stopping. It was a sickening sight and one she knew would never left her. Temari-chan, Naruto said, slightly worried as he touched her arm. I need to get my fan, Temari said as she moved. She didn't look back, she didn't let any emotion onto her face. Which was just as well. At the moment she felt too numb to feel or say anything. When everyone gathered together again, they met up in one of the main rooms. Kakashi had found Sakura and made their way together. They had found Naruto and Temari, who by that time had found her fan. Soon after that they finally met up with Sasuke. When asked what happened, he just shrugged, saying he had to deal with the ninja he had been trapped with. He didn't elaborate. Only that he just had to find another route as he couldn't have broken down the door that had been locked shut. The place was starting to get more and more crowded as Naruto's shadow clone army was starting to dwindle. They needed to come up with a plan on dealing with everything. So, any bright ideas? Sasuke asked as they looked around. We need to deal with this Kane person, Sakura said as she thought about it. Without him, these guys won't be much of a problem. I think we should burn this place down as well, Kakashi stated, seeing the surprised looks. Well, it would cover our escape as well as prevent anyone else from using this place as a base. It would scatter the men and prevent this place being used again by them or others like them. Kakashi looked at his genin. Naruto, Sasuke, can I trust you two to set this up? He figured between Sasuke's fire jutsus and Naruto's natural ability to wreak havoc and destroy things, they could easily make this place a smoldering ruins in a few hours. Sure, but where are you going, Kakashi-sensei? Naruto asked him. To take care of a loose end, Kakashi said cryptically as he went on his way. Kane was in his room waiting for an update on what was going on. The sounds of battle had slowly been fading over time. For now he needed to know what the status was. A few men had come up and told him a few things, that there were fighting inside the compound, but after that nothing else. He hadn't heard back from those ninja either. He wasn't sure if that was a good thing or not. He looked out the large window that was behind his desk. So far the fighting seemed to be dying down. There weren't any more explosions, at least. He didn't want to think about the repairs. He just hoped that girl was worth enough to cover it. Interesting office, an unfamiliar voice said behind him. I should have known it would have been at the highest point of the building. Kane turned around quickly, but there was no one there, but then again there was a lot of darkness. He had turned out most of the lights so no one would see him at the window. Being killed while he was looking out at the battle would have been a bad move on his point simply because the light was giving his profile away at the window. He slowly edged towards his desk for the blade he kept there. You have me at a disadvantage, Kane said, looking for any kind of movement. It seems I have an uninvited guest. You wouldn't happen to let me know who you were and what happened to the ninja I hired, would you? The name you don't need to know, as I don't think you're worth it. As for the ninja, well. Suddenly a presence was felt behind him as Kane felt a cold blade enter his back. He choked out a sound as he tried to look behind him. He never heard a thing. Never even knew the man was behind him until it was too late. Kakashi leaned in and gently said to him, as for the ninja, you'll be seeing them. He reached with his other hand and quickly snapped the man's neck. He let him fall to the floor and left. The place would soon be on fire and he didn't want to be here when it did. Later, when they returned from their mission, all of village had been waiting to see them. Once again they were given a hero's welcome. When word got around that the threat was gone, people wanted to thank them all personally. But after a long mission they really needed to get to rest. So with some thanks to all the people, they moved to their rooms in the hotel eager for a rest. They were all tired and sporting some injuries as well that they needed to see to tending. For Kakashi, he threw his vest down as he got out the injury kit he kept in one of his sealed scrolls. They had put a minimum amount of time on their injuries back before they left to come back to the village, but now it was time to get a better look at them. So far as missions went, it hadn't been too bad. Sure, they had some problems, but all missions do. No one needed to go to the hospital and they had accomplished all their goals. He doubted the survivors of that criminal organization would attack the village anymore. Not without their leader or the ninja. The people of the village could defend themselves against common criminals now. He started with fixing up his injuries. It was times like this a medic would come in handy. He only knew the basic field medic training that Anbu needed to know. As sometimes you had to do solo missions, and if you got hurt, well, you were pretty much screwed if you didn't know how to treat yourself well enough to get to safety. But thinking about the mission, he couldn't help but think something was going on that he didn't know about. Temari looked very distracted and Naruto seemed concerned, and not for her physical injury. Someone had happened and she wasn't talking about it. Naruto could look after that, but he would have to keep an eye on her if things got worse. She was obviously dealing with something. Then there was Sasuke. He was in deep thought as well, but it seemed more like he was trying to make up his mind about something. The only one he really didn't have to worry as much about was Sakura. She did seem a little down when she looked at Sasuke, but other than that she was doing well. This was why he didn't like to teach young kids. They weren't mature enough to handle some things and he had no experience in dealing with kids. It was part of the reason he always failed the previous genin teams. Well, that and they had no teamwork at all, and this way he could have more time to himself. But with Team 7 he thought that maybe he saw some hope that he had found the perfect team. Well, he should have known that no one was perfect, he mused with a chuckle. Hell, more often than not, he was brought back to his own genin team under Yellow Flash. But it seemed that the bond of Team 7 had been shaky lately. Temari had helped. She had formed bonds with Naruto and Sakura, but Sasuke still remained the problem. After finishing his first aid and laid down on his futon with a sigh, he stared up the ceiling wondering what he could do to help things out. Maybe he should ask Asuma and Kurenai. They at least had teams that seemed to work well with each other. He could ask Guy, but he dismissed that. Just because if he ever asked Guy for anything the man would hold that over his head for years and it just wasn't worth it. Thinking of home brought his mind to Anko. Maybe she could have a talk with Sasuke. He might actually listen to her as she was given a curse seal as well. Maybe they could find something in common and she could warn him about the path he was walking down. It was a long shot but it couldn't hurt. In fact he felt that was a good idea. He'd go and see her and ask her. Thinking of the purple-haired woman brought this thoughts to this little, friends with benefits, thing they had going. Besides the fact that the sex was great and she was fun to hang out with, he was thinking of her more often. It was really odd, he never had a woman brought to his mind so much. Was it just lust they had with each other or could there be something more? Or maybe it was just him, after all he had never really had a real relationship. Maybe he was just catching up with his age, but he was only just 26. Then again in the ninja world that could be considered middle age, that was a laugh, him having a midlife crisis already. Maybe Anko just wanted to have someone that she could have fun and stress relief with. After all she was a younger woman of 24, she had time to just play around before she felt the need to commit to anything he bet. He sighed again, he wouldn't think about it for now. Right now he just wanted to sleep and then face any problems in the morning. In the Temari and Naruto Uzumaki room, it was pretty silent. Naruto being mostly healed up only needed some bandages, a few were just for show for the others too. Temari needed help though as her ribs were sore as was her arms. Naruto helped with putting bandages on her exposed torso. He couldn't help but blush as he did so but he noticed her eyes had that faraway look in them. Sorry you had to do that, Naruto said knowing what she was most likely thinking about. It's okay, it happens, Temari said in a neutral voice. One day's friend could be tomorrow's enemy. No it's not okay, Naruto said sternly as his raised voice actually got her full attention. She had rarely heard him with that tone of voice to her. You two knew each other, I don't know the full story but I could tell that you two were friends. It doesn't matter. It's all in the past. Temari shouted as she turned away from him. She felt the stinging in her eyes from tears. She didn't want to cry, she didn't want to have anyone see her cry. She hated to be seen as weak and she wouldn't do that now. It should matter, Naruto said to her as he placed a hand on her shoulder. She shrugged it off not wanting him to feel sorry for her. You don't know what it's like to kill a friend anyway. Temari said the words without thinking them. She just wanted to lash out. She had lost one of the most important people in her life not once but twice. And this time she had killed her. She could still see the bloody corpse she had turned Kimi into. Every time she closed her eyes she could see that image. There was a silence for a moment until Naruto spoke softly. There was a boy, his name was Haku. When I first met him I thought he was a girl actually, but he helped me. He told me that to truly be strong, you need someone precious to protect. He gave me something that I hold onto, it's one of my most important rules I live by. Then the next time we saw each other, he was trying to kill me and Sasuke. Temari turned slowly to face him and she saw the sadness in his eyes as he remembered that day. I never blamed him, he was just trying to protect his most precious person. I nearly did kill him too, I wanted to kill him but when I saw his eyes I just couldn't. He was a lot like me too, I considered him a friend. But in the end he sacrificed himself to protect a ninja that Kakashi was going to kill. I know that it was Kakashi that did the killing blow, but I still think I could have stopped him. I could have done something, grabbed him but I didn't. Sometimes I still think that I didn't stop him on purpose. That a part of me was still angry that I thought at the time he had killed Sasuke. Naruto shook his head at that. Still, he was a good person really. And I think of him as a friend. Even though I just met him, but in the end my team killed him just because we were on separate sides. But I still hold on to what he taught me. He finished. He hadn't noticed she had moved until she was holding on to him. She was holding on tightly, more for herself than anything else so he gently held her back. How do I go on, how do I live with this? she asked, nearly choking on the tears she was holding back. She was like an older sister to me, and she made a choice too. She tried to kill you, Naruto said, trying to think of something that could ease her pain. Just remember what she was like, remember the good times. Remember her as she was. That's how I like to remember Haku, as the person I met in that field and not as my enemy who died. Temari couldn't take it anymore. All the pain she had been pushing down, she just couldn't do it anymore. She broke down as she started to cry into his shoulder. The pain of losing Kimi again, of learning the truth, of killing her and everything else, as it was just too much. She needed something to hold onto, and Naruto was perfect. He let her cry her heart out to him, letting his presence help her deal with the pain. Sometime later, Team 7 finally made it home without any trouble. Temari had been very quiet on the way home, but no one pushed her. She was always by Naruto's side, almost like she was taking strength in just his presence. Sasuke was quiet as well, and so it was left to Naruto and Sakura to try and keep things interesting as they made their way back. The two tried to lighten the mood, but it wasn't easy. By the time they reached the massive gates of the village, Kakashi could literally feel the sigh with his team. It had been a long mission and everyone would be tired. "Why don't you all go home? I'll handle the mission report," Kakashi told them. His charges made their way home and Kakashi sighed, not sure if he could deal with this. He wasn't good with dealing with the emotions of one so young. He might have to deal with this if things didn't improve. At least with Temari, she had Naruto who seemed to be helping her with something. Sasuke was just a mystery. He was walling himself up and not letting anyone even close. With Naruto and Temari, he was watching his young wife carefully. She hadn't said much after that night. She broke down crying. He figured she was just coming to terms with everything. She had told him everything about Kimi, how she had been the one that Temari had looked up to and trained her in the use of the fan. How things had gone when Gaara had killed her lover while he had been in some kind of battle lust. She went straight to the shower and changed. He felt like the same and used the smaller one downstairs in their home. When he came out, he looked over the place. It had started to take on a feel of a real home lately. Here and there were touches of both himself and her. There were a few pictures hanging on the living room wall, of Team 7 and others. There was a picture of Temari and her old team and family. He also saw a present he made for her once. He had taken her old Suna headband and put it into a glass case and placed it on the wall. When she had seen it and asked him why he did it, he just said that she should be proud of where she came from, so that she would never forget and that everyone would know she was proud of her Suna heritage. She had given him a beautiful smile and pulled him into a kiss for that. Apparently he had made a good choice in that. He had changed in the small bathroom after taking the clothes with him for his shower. He dropped his dirty clothing in the hamper, knowing if he didn't she would get angry with him. He finished drying his hair and placed it in there as well. Naruto made it up to the second floor. His old room before the marriage was pretty much turned into a spare room now, since he now slept in the same bed as Temari after their wedding. At first it took some getting used to, but he grew to really like it. He stepped into their room and saw that she already had a nightgown on and slipped inside the bed. She was turned away from him and he paused, wondering if she wanted to be alone. "Please stay," Temari told him, almost like she could tell what his hesitation was about. Naruto wordlessly slipped into bed with her as she turned and hugged herself to his body. She didn't cry, but she did need to have some kind of comfort. She felt a little weak at doing this, but she didn't care anymore about appearances. Besides, as long as it was Naruto, she didn't care what he saw. For him, she could afford to look weak because he would never judge her, only love her. It was that feeling of love that she needed the most in this moment. It would take time for this opened wound to heal over again, but as long as she had her husband, she knew that the healing process would be better this time around. Sasuke finally made it home and the place was quiet as usual, which he didn't mind. Sometimes he preferred the quiet. There were no distractions or anything else. No one to pressure him or fangirls to annoy him. No more people with pity in their eyes that looked at him or anything else like that. Here was a place where no one would bother him, and he was surrounded by the memories of what he had to do with his life. He had to make these halls full again one day while ensuring that no one was left to harm them. To avenge the blood that had been spilled here. He kicked his shoes off and went to his room. He placed his backpack on the floor. He would go through it and get it ready for whenever they had another mission. He placed his weapon pouch off his leg and onto a small table. He slowly opened it as he placed a finger through the hole of a kunai and quickly turned. He brought the kunai up to the neck to the red-headed girl behind him. "Fuck," Chiyuya cried out, taking a step back. "What the hell? Don't sneak up on me, ever," Sasuke told her as he placed the weapon back. "I see you were able to get in easily enough." "Yeah, just fucking fine," Chiyuya rubbed her neck. She thought it would be funny to sneak up on the kid. How the hell was always on their guard even in their own home? Then again, given the history of this place, maybe she could see why. Having your older brother kill everyone here at night, she wouldn't sleep too heavily either. "So where can I set up?" "There's a room down the hall. It was a spa for visitors that you can place your things," he told her. She shrugged as she went back into the hall and picked up her bag. She couldn't believe that she had to stay here again, but at least it was in a nice place. She wasn't hiding in the shadows or in some abandoned building or room with the others of her team. It was good to have some personal space. Honestly, sometimes the others really got on her nerves. The room was pretty decent, a little dusty, but then again it wasn't like she expected him to dust the entire place. Hell, given she had to hide out here, it gave her something to do. She sighed. She was told to do anything in order to get the Uchiha boy on their side, and she knew that anything meant anything. Any kind of manipulation or lie, even telling him the truth, even offering him her body if it came to that, she would do anything for the mission. But she would accomplish this mission. The boy had already accepted her offer. That was the first step. Now she just had to show him all the things that Orochimaru could offer him, and he would go willingly. It had been nearly a week since the return from Wave and things were settling back to normal. Currently Naruto and Temari were in their yard continuing his wind elemental training. Naruto was glad that Temari was more like her old self. He did see her look sad at times when she thought he wasn't looking, but he knew that it would take time to get over it. He still felt sad thinking about the third Haku. Currently Naruto was trying to cut a rock in his hand again. He really wanted to get this done. He had been using clones to help him lately under Temari's watchful eye, of course. The first time he tried to do it with an army of clones, he collapsed after it. She had been worried and then pissed at him for going too far. So she was helping him while he used a small supply of clones. It wasn't as fast, but over the time they had been starting this, he felt he was making progress. "All right," Temari said from her place in front of the real Naruto. "Call back all the clones and let's see how this works now." "Okay." Naruto eagerly dispelled them and felt the head rush of information being slammed into his head. Although he was only using a dozen, it was still a little taxing. But he felt that he was a lot closer now. He looked at the rock and concentrated. He felt for the wind chakra like Temari had taught him to. He covered the rock in both hands as he shut his eyes and felt the chakra starting to move. It took him a moment, but the loud crack told him something had happened. He opened his hands and grinned. The rock was split in two. It wasn't a clean break. The edges were all jagged and there were cracks all along the split, but he did it. "Yes, finally I cut the stupid rock." Temari smiled a little, seeing him jump up with joy. Whenever he accomplished something, he acted like he had moved a mountain. Well, it was impressive with how fast he had learned this. It had taken her a good year to fully master it, and he had done it in months. Or at least he had taken the first step at least. "Settle down and look at this," Temari told him, picking up a rock herself. Naruto sat down and watched as she placed both hands onto the rock. There was the same cracking sound, but when she opened her hands, the rock was split perfectly. It was a seamless clean cut, unlike Naruto's cut. "This is what you'll have to shoot for now. Just cutting it isn't enough, you need to also learn how to make a smooth cut like this. When you have, that means you have mastered calling out your wind chakra," she explained to him. "Ah, I wanted to learn some cool wind jutsu," he pouted while crossing his arms. Temari tried not to sigh. It was strange how Naruto one moment could be kind of cool but then reverted back to a childish state. Well, he needed to learn patience. There was no way she was going to have him get himself killed by jumping into things like he had a habit of doing. "Look, this is important, Naruto. Wind is the most dangerous type of element to use if you don't know what you're doing. I heard how one person tried to use this one wind jutsu without practicing enough, and you know what happened. The kind off his arm was flayed off his body, the entire arm. They couldn't fix that given all the other damage, and he lost his arm, and nearly died from it. Naruto paled at the thought of all the skin of his arm being ripped off. Maybe it was good to make sure he could do it properly after all. He knew that the damn fox would heal him, but he really didn't want to test the limits. He wasn't immortal or anything, and he didn't want to find out if he could regrow an arm. Plus he bet that would hurt a lot, and didn't feel like finding out what his pain threshold was either. Okay, so how can I learn to make it a cleaner cut? He asked. She smiled as she took his hands and placed a rock in them. I'll show you. Naruto looked at her as she did this. Sure, they were married, yes, they shared a bed and a few times had sex. But even just feeling her hands on his felt really nice. They were soft but strong from her own training and skills. Plus she really smelled nice and she was good looking. She noticed him watching and saw her blush a bit. He must have been staring a bit too hard. Concentrate on your work, she told him gently. Oh sure. He stuck his tongue out a bit as he tried to do what he had just done before with the previous rock. Temari did enjoy that he did look at her like that. It always felt nice to know that she had this effect on him. Plus she seemed to care more and more for him. First she was scared of him, then as she got to know him, they slowly become somewhat friends. As time went on she found herself caring for him, and she was sure falling for him. She was pretty sure she was in love in him, after everything they had been through, and Temari was thankful for it. When this whole marriage thing was told to her, she feared she would be trapped in some loveless marriage for duty. But things were slowly changing for the better, and she was actually glad this happened. Kakashi's apartment. It was a slow week for Kakashi. Training was done for the day with his team, and there were no D-rank missions, so they had the read of the day off. Most likely Temari would help Naruto with his elemental training. Sakura said something about looking up some information at the library. He wasn't sure what, but he got the feeling the girl was looking for what type of ninja she wanted to be. She was at a crossroads it seemed, and he hoped whatever path she chose to follow she put her heart into it. As for Sasuke, well, he was as distant as ever. Something was going on as he left without a word and went back to his home as soon as he could. Even before he used to at least be with his teammates sometimes, now it was like he found the team an annoyance. He really wished he knew what he could do with that boy. Unfortunately his plan with Anko hit a snag. She had been on a mission when they had returned. He left a message at her place and she would show up at some point, he hoped. He also hoped that she could at least try and talk some sense into Sasuke. Kakashi wasn't sure, but he was worried that boy might be experimenting with the curse mark. It wasn't anything he noticed at first, but the boy seemed to be a bit darker lately, and he knew the kind of effects that mark had on you. Plus with all the secrecy he had been doing, it could mean that Sasuke was doing something that Kakashi wouldn't approve of. The boy also had refused the new seal as well. He hoped he was wrong, it could be something else entirely. He sighed as he lay on his bed trying to read his book but failing. He just couldn't enjoy it while his mind was going a mile an hour. It was then that he heard a knock on his door. Curious, he placed his book on the nightstand and went to answer the door. He was pleasantly surprised to see a slightly dirty Anko with a bag on her shoulder. Hey, saw your message, you needed my help with something, she asked as she walked into his place. I was hoping you might be able to talk with Sasuke. Kakashi filled her in on everything that was going on with him, even his concerns on what he might be doing. He could already see that Anko was a bit concerned as well. She knew full well the kind of life it was with that mark on you. How you had to constantly try and not have to worry about it, or give in to temptation. She sighed with a frustrated sound as she took her hair down. Well, that certainly is something to worry about if he's using that thing. I told you that you should have just placed that new seal on him even if he didn't want it. Anko told him. You know that I couldn't do something like that to another ninja without their say-so. Kakashi told her as he took in her appearance. Did you come straight here after your mission? Yeah, I was going to take a shower but they had to shut off the water, Anko said, slightly annoyed. They had a burst pipe, so for the next few hours my apartment is without water. So I figured I could use yours. Be my guest. Kakashi smirked as she slipped out of her coat. He picked it up. You want me to wash this with your clothing? Well, you don't have to, but it would be nice, Anko said as she started to slip out of her clothing on the way to the shower. She knew that she was teasing him, but it wasn't like they hadn't seen each other naked already. She was totally naked by the time she hit the bathroom and placed her bag on the sink. She started the water, and when the warm water hit her skin she felt instantly better. Her muscles started to relax a bit as she washed off days of sweat, dirt and grime from her body. By the time she was done she felt better than ever. She showered and now she needed one more thing. She opened the door and noticed he wasn't outside. Anko was a bit disappointed by that. She wrapped a towel around herself and found him in the next room. Kakashi had one of those washer-dryers that was put into a hallway closet. Lucky him, she had to use the laundry room at her place. She wrapped her arms around him. So, now that I have to wait for my clothing to dry, is there anything we can do to pass the time? Kakashi looked over his shoulder and noticed her lack of dress. I think we can think of something. She grinned as she pulled off his mask and kissed him deeply. She had been craving this lately and wrapped her arms around him. She didn't care that the towel fell off her. Kakashi picked her up by her ass as she locked her legs around him as he carried them into the bedroom. Lemon. It didn't take long for them to get Kakashi in a similar state of dress as herself. They were happily laying together on his bed, kissing and feeling each other's bodies. She moaned when he started to suck on her neck. It was one of her pleasure spots and he used it all the time. She felt one of his hands going to her sex and started to work their magic on her. She moaned as she decided to return the favor. Her hand snaked its way down his body as she felt his hard manhood. She gently started to stroke him, hearing pleasing sounds from him. It was so nice to have someone she could have sex with whenever they needed it. It was just too hard to find a decent guy. Either they were good in bed, but she could never see herself in a relationship with them, or they seemed like a nice guy but came in like seconds. Kakashi seemed to be the best of both worlds. He was a decent guy, she got along with him, and the sex was always enjoyable. Hell, he even gave her that new seal that helped to subdue that stupid curse mark on her neck. He really wasn't such a bad guy, so why were they just friends with benefits? Maybe because she didn't want to screw up what was a good thing. Besides, her in a relationship. What was she thinking? Shut up and just enjoy, Anko told her brain. I don't need to overthink this. Oh shit. God, he's good with those fingers. Kakashi started to trail his kisses down to her chest, making sure to give proper attention to her breasts. They really were nice ones too, not too big, not too small, and they felt great. Plus he loved the sounds she made when he started to suck on her nipples. Oh fuck me, Anko moaned softly, grabbing his head as she started to take one of her hardening nipples into his mouth. The feel of his mouth working on the sensitive part, the way his tongue played with it. She didn't even had to tell him to bite down as he knew she liked it like that. I'll get to that in a moment, Kakashi chuckled as he started on the other one. To hell with a moment, do me now, she told him. Well, if you insist. He sat up and turned her onto her stomach. He pulled her hips up as she got on her hands and knees facing away from him. You better put that in the right hole, Kakashi, she warned him. She never did like anal. It was just too painful for her at the moment, but he didn't seem to mind. She felt his hand caressing her back, going along her spine, making her shiver in anticipation. Then she felt his sex organ slightly rubbing against her wet sex. She moved her hips, trying to get more feeling of their skin rubbing against each other. Then he lined himself up and pushed into her. She moaned out as her head hung down. She loved how deep he could get in this position, and with being able to angle his thrusts downward he could rub against her G-spot too. He started with slow, methodical thrusts as she pushed her body back against him. Kakashi had to admit that Anko had a great ass. He groped it as they had sex. Then an idea got to him. He took one hand away and spanked her ass. The loud smack sound was heard with an outcry from him. Want more? Kakashi grinned. Yes, do it harder. She told him, getting turned on by this. She never told anyone, but she had this fantasy of being taken across someone's lap and being spanked. She just felt silly about it, so she never once mentioned it. Thrusting or spanking? Kakashi asked amused. Both, she replied. He started to comply with her wishes. Each time he slapped her ass she couldn't help but cry out in shock and pleasure. He would then caress it and then start again, plus he was going faster and harder now. After a few minutes of this she just knew her ass would look all red, but it was so worth it. Oh god, I'm getting close, fuck me as hard as you can, Kakashi. He grunted with the effort as he used both hands on her hips to pull her towards him as hard as he could. She was crying out in pleasure now. She couldn't even hold herself up as her arms gave out. She bit into his pillow screaming to muffle the sounds. Then her whole body just started jerking as she screamed out as she climaxed. Kakashi, feeling how her body suddenly was now clenching his manhood, he couldn't take it anymore. With a few more hard thrusts he moaned as he filled her body. After a moment of catching his breath and after his body was done he leaned down onto her gently. Anko moaned in post-orgasmic delight, feeling his body pressed up against hers felt nice. They shifted to their sides as he held her to him. It felt nice just being like this. Both of them did like the sex, but these moments were nice as well. They didn't need to say anything, they just lay there holding of caressing each other lightly. Anko closed her eyes enjoying the feeling. This was something she never did before. Mostly it was either disappointing or after the orgasm she dressed or kicked the guy out of her bed. With Kakashi it was different. She actually liked just laying here in his arms. What she didn't know was that he was feeling the same thing. He liked having her here in his arms, it felt natural for some reason. But she wasn't totally satisfied just yet, she was ready for a bit more fun first. She turned around and faced him. She grinned as she pushed him onto his back and started to trail kisses down his body. She took his limp member in her hand and started some of her oral treatment on it. Kakashi groaned. He was still sensitive down there and the things she was doing with her tongue felt better than normal. She would moan as she licked him, and when he was hard enough that's when she started to suck on him. She would do just the tip at first and slowly get more and more down. Oh god, Anko, he said, feeling her warm wet mouth working on him. She really was great at this, and the moans she made while doing it only added to it. If you keep this up I'm not going to last long. She stopped licking her lips at him. Well, we can't have that, can we? She grinned as she sat up and started to straddle him. She eagerly took hold of his member and guided herself down onto him. Oh yes, this is what a girl needs, she grinned, grinding her hips against his. Kakashi slowly caressed her body as she started to ride him gently. They started off slow, making this one last longer as they both wanted to enjoy it. She moaned as she threw her head back as she started to go a bit harder. She felt his hands on her chest as she ran her hands over his stomach. She really loved the six-pack he had on him. Soon they were going at it harder as she rode him harder. He pulled her down as he lifted his head to start taking one of her breasts into his mouth while she rode him. She cried out as she gripped the sheets, going faster and harder as he thrust back with equal force. She lost track of time as they continued on, but Anko couldn't hide it anymore. She cried out his name as she felt herself finally climax. She fell onto him, feeling him continue on. He gripped her ass as she moaned in pleasure, feeling him continue. He suddenly pushed against her as hard as he could, groaning in the wet warm feeling of his release. Lemon end. Both of them were tired and aching after their round of sex. Kakashi laid on his back with Anko snuggled up against him, resting her head against his shoulder. The sheets were a mess, and so were they, but they felt better for it. Anko chuckled as a thought hit her. I'm going to need another shower now. God, I think I got more aches. Why does good sex have to give you that? Well, it's worth the price, he told her, looking down at her. She really did look great with her hair down, even if it was slick from sweat and sticking to her head like that. She looked up at him with her brown eyes. What? She asked, seeing him stare. Just thinking how good you look even now, he said honestly. Anko smiled a bit. It was a little corny since she never really had the pillow talk before now. Truth was, she kind of enjoyed it. With Kakashi there was no pressure or awkwardness after sex. She just hit him lightly for going soft on her, but it did feel nice just being here. She moaned as she thought of what she had to do now. Crap, now I need another shower, and the aches and pains on top of the aches from sex won't help. I'm tired and I'm really not looking forward to the walk home. Kakashi hadn't thought of that, so the words were out of his mouth, "Then stay." She looked up at him to see if he was serious, and he looked to be. She smiled as she sighed and relaxed. "You better be careful, a girl could get used to this." He chuckled at that as he gently wrapped an arm around her, his hand slowly stroking her bare shoulder. Honestly thinking on it, was this really so bad having her here? It got him thinking about what if it was like if they actually were more than they were now. What they had now was very comfortable, but honestly they always seemed to be spending more and more time together. Sometimes he felt like he was making excuses to visit her. She seemed to accidentally run into him. What he didn't know was that she had known he was taking a certain route and decided to pass by him. She was finding that she liked having him around. He didn't judge her past like many had, he was fun to be around with as well. But both were uncertain as to bring up what they had and what they felt about it. Maybe it was just a need for human contact. After all, when they went home they went to an empty apartment. There was no one waiting for them or to welcome them home. When they spent the night at each other's, it felt nice to feel a warm body next to theirs. It was like a small hole that they hadn't known about was being slowly filled up. Anko was now thinking how when she got home these days she felt bored and isolated. The thing was, she always felt like that, but since this thing with Kakashi she was actually aware of it. She also noticed something else. Normally when she saw couples out and about she just shrugged it off. She had never really thought about relationships, but seeing people now made get this longing. She didn't like it. She never envied anyone in her life, so why start now? If she wasn't so young she would say her age was catching up to her. Originally all she thought was that good friends and good sex now and again was all she needed. So why did she feel like she wanted more out of life all of a sudden? She felt how Kakashi was lightly running his hand over her shoulder. No one had done that to her before. What surprised her the most was how much she liked it. She knew that this was dangerous, thinking that maybe this whole thing with him was a mistake after all. Maybe it was time to cut and run before things got too complicated. She didn't want to ruin the friendship, but she found she would miss what they had now. She scowled a bit. Things had been going so well and now she just had to start thinking on things and it had ruined it all. Maybe she should talk to Kurenai about this. She hadn't told her friend all the details as to why she was hanging out with Kakashi all the time, but maybe her friend could give her some advice. With that in mind she forced herself not to think on this anymore. She was tired and wanted some sleep. Maybe in the morning she could just forget all about this and keep things going. Maybe even a little fun in the shower with him before she left at least. That would be some fun, at least if things went crazy. Uchiha Compound. Sasuke was currently in his training room trying to master the curse mark. It wasn't easy and Tayuya was a stern teacher. She didn't let up no matter what, although her personally liked that kind of training. The harder the training the more powerful you got in Sasuke's mind. Although she had a foul mouth, at least she was a strong ninja. From what he learned she was more a genjutsu type and a part of something called the Sound 4. But she was teaching him what he needed to learn. Apparently the curse seal was a lot more than what he thought it was. She didn't know everything, but what she did explain was that it altered chakra to the point where it was more powerful. Currently he called upon his powers. He saw the markings flow over his body and felt the strength flow into him. Now remember, you have to control the power constantly. If you lose control then you can't focus on the battle, she stated as she let the curse seal released on herself as dark lines crawled all over her body. When you can master this, the marks will cover your entire body like mine and not halfway like yours. So the full effect is to get the marks over my entire body? Sasuke asked her. Well, that will let you master level 1 of the curse seal, yes. Level 1. He was surprised by that, so there was more power to this seal. That was very interesting to him. So when I finish this I can get a new more powerful level. She laughed at him for a moment. Please, you're no way near ready for that. The curse seal when first applied is a 9 in 10 chance of killing you. You were lucky that you were the 1 chance in that 10 that survived. But in order to gain the next step you have to die. To die. He didn't like the sounds of that. He couldn't afford to die. What the hell does that mean, and does that mean you can't gain that power? I already got to that point, asshole. She didn't like any implication that she might be able to do anything or that she was weaker than someone. And I mean to die figuratively. There is this special ritual you have to go through, and like with getting the curse seal, it can kill you as well. But when you do pass it, you will gain a whole new power. She decided that he might need a small demonstration about it, so she called forth more power. She figured that this place was large enough that the odds of someone nearby sensing the power would be pretty remote. But she would keep it short at any case. Sasuke watched in fascination as the girl before him changed again. But it was more drastic this time around. Her skin became darker, the whites of her eyes became black, and her iris was now a dark golden color. Her hair remained the same, but now white horns were growing out of her head. Some would call it a demonic look, but to him she looked powerful. He could feel the power flowing off her as well, and he wanted it. This is something he needed. With something like this he could surprise Itachi, and it would shorten the gap of power between them. This is the second level, Tayuya stated as she looked at him. This is the power that you can get with Orochimaru, and you know what? This is only the start of things. There is so many techniques, many that are forbidden that others can't or won't teach you. She could see him thinking about that, and it was true what she was saying. Orochimaru always did experiments to further the strength and power of both himself and those that served under him. Of course those that were picked to be the experiments didn't have it so lucky, but they were usually the bottom of the barrel people that they could afford to lose. She was told to use any and all means to bring him over, and she could see that a little further enticement might be needed. He was already going down the path, but he needed a little more nudging. Thankfully those days of watching him she had learned one thing. He had some sort of rivalry with that blonde-haired idiot for some reason. Although maybe you don't want power, she said as she slowly turned back to her normal form. After all, you're not the most powerful genin in this village anymore, are you? What? He said darkly. I've listened to what people have been saying, she told him with a smirk. I mean, he was the one that defeated that Gaara guy, and what did they do? They give him the boy's older sister as a peace offering to him. They gave him a powerful female ninja so they could spawn a whole litter of great ninja. I mean, you have to rebuild your clan, don't you? A woman like her would have been great for that. Strong children, and after all, weren't the Uchiha one of the founders of this village? But no, they pass you up and give it to an orphan boy. Someone that has never come from any clan. That was the dead last, that from what I see only gets by through luck. Maybe they want you to mate with someone from this village instead, although that would be a pitiful sight. The girls in this village are all so weak in comparison with someone like Temari. Someone who is strong, intelligent, capable, knows what it means to be a ninja and the daughter of a cage. She could see her words were worming their way into his mind. The seeds were being planted, of that she could see. As a genjutsu expert she knew things about deception and manipulation. She looked around the room as she did. It was easy to see what made him tick. Being here, seeing all the empty rooms and homes brought back her own memories. This place was once home to many people, young and old. They worked and lived here, but now it was as silent as a tomb. He didn't know this, but she could relate to what happened to him. Looking at him, she saw the same rage and fire that had burned inside of herself not too long ago. She wanted the power to right a wrong, and Orochimaru had given it to her. So she served him, and she didn't regret it. She turned and left him there, letting her words echo in his mind, and she knew that soon he would come to her, but he needed to also trust her. That might mean she had to do something she didn't want to. If it was just giving him her body, that she could do, but to gain his trust she would have to talk about something. Something in her past that she had never told another living soul, but if she did, he would see her not as just another sound ninja, but as someone that could relate to his pain. It was the afternoon and a few days since his house guest had moved in with him. Sasuke had been training non-stop with the girl when he got away from his team and then went with Tayuya to train in the use of the curse seal. Slowly he felt he was getting somewhere, but he couldn't help be motivated when she had shown him the second level of the mark. That form had looked powerful to him. She had later explained that, like the markings, the second form was different for each person. He wondered what kind of form he would have and the power it would hold. Unlike the training with his team, this training felt like he was actually learning something. Kakashi was being more even with his team, teaching them in groups and wasn't teaching them any new jutsus, as he felt they were coming along fine. Well, that wasn't good enough for Sasuke. For to Yuya, she had been watching him as he worked. The boy, she had to admit, put more effort into training than even most ninjas she knew. But she knew what kind of motivation revenge could be. It was a fire that burned inside of you and wouldn't stop no matter what until it was satisfied. Although it was extremely boring in this village, she had to put on a genjutsu or even change her hair color and clothing and walk out looking like a civilian at times. Mainly it was just because she was getting cabin fever just waiting around all day for him to get back. Hell, by this point she looked forward to his time here. At least he was someone to talk to and train with. Sure, it was mostly work-related, but anything was better than nothing. Still, she was starting to lose patience with how long this was taking. The boy should have left long ago, but he was still here. She had been trying to be subtle with pushing him to leave, but she soon found out that you had to plant the seeds and let things go from there. Any direct approach wouldn't work with him. Currently they were taking a break from the training. Both were sitting out on one of the decks looking at the setting sun. She was suddenly brought back to an old memory, of a life so long ago and far away that it seemed more like the life of someone else. She wasn't that person anymore, she hadn't been for years. Although her patience was starting to run out, she really didn't like staying in a village that if they found out she was part of the team that had held in their previous Hokage with Orochimaru, well, it wouldn't be good for her. Sasuke was at the moment sitting on the floor in the lotus position trying to bring his curse seal powers to their full potential. He had his eyes closed as he tried to bring the power out of him. He could feel the darkness in it as it slowly moved through his body. He could feel his body becoming stronger, and by now he felt that he had more control over it. He was taught to let the power flow all over and through him, to allow it to roam through his body at a constant rate. It reminded him of his tree climbing exercise. He had to keep it at a constant rate. Too much and it would overwhelm him. Too little and it would be too uncontrollable. If it fought it, then that's why he felt pain earlier in his fight with Gaara. She had explained how he had been trying to use his own chakra but had also been drawing out the curse seal at the same time but was denying the curse seal. Plus Kakashi's current seal on him wasn't helping either. But with the training he had found he could finally draw out the power at will and without any pain. How long do we have to keep doing this? Sasuke finally asked as he opened his eyes looking at her. I got this under control now. Look, if you want more I can only teach you so much, Yuya said, annoyed at him. Only Orochimaru-sama can give you the full power and even more. Sasuke had heard this all before. He sighed as the power slowly went away. He stood up and glared at her. You always say that. Don't think I don't know what you're trying to do. I know you want me to leave and go with you, but I have to know if he can keep his promises of power. I won't waste my time anymore. He can give you the revenge you want, she told him seriously. And how do you know that? She paused. This was the moment she would have to tell him. It would be the only way to get him to know that Orochimaru could give him revenge. She just didn't want to relive that old life, but she had a mission. You think you're the only one that has suffered. You think you're the only one that wanted revenge for being wronged. And how would you know that? You ever wanted revenge for your life and family being destroyed? Yes, I do, you asshole. She shouted at him. You're not the only one that knows the pain of that. Sasuke looked at her for a moment. He hadn't expected that, but looking into her eyes he could see she was telling the truth. Those eyes filled with pain and revenge, were the eyes he looked into the mirror all the time. Especially lately, after his last meeting with Itachi, all he could think about was killing his brother. So did he ever give you what you wanted? Yes he did, she said as she sat down and thought back to the memories. I suppose I should tell you the whole story, but I'm only saying this fucking once. You miss anything too bad. I'm not telling you anything twice or anything, got it? She glared at him as she saw him nod his head. Flashback. It had all started back years ago in one of the smaller nations. She had only been 10 years old at the time. Her village was a farming community that worked in a fairly secluded area. She had been an only child in her family and she knew little of the world. What was the point? After all, she was learning from her mother to how to be a normal girl. She learned how to do everything from her. Her father even taught her how to play a flute, something she kept doing all her life. She didn't remember much of her village, but she did remember was that she had enjoyed her life. But then one day it had all changed. She had been helping her mother with the washing when the shouting had started. That's when they knew something had been wrong. She had pieced it together after the fact, but a group of bandits had came to the village. Since most main villages usually held contracts with certain ninja villages or were protected by other forces. But it was the smaller ones that suffered. They couldn't afford protection or weren't important enough to justify stationing troops. They ran to the house. Tayuya had remembered how scared she had been. Before then, the most violence she had seen was when some of the men got a little drunk in the streets. She saw black smoke rising and knew there was a fire. How bad she wasn't sure at that moment. She just remembered that her mother rushed her into their home. Their home was slightly elevated off the ground. As they had plenty of rain in the village, it prevented their homes from flooding. Her mother had been scared. When Tayuya asked about her father, her mother just said that he was most likely fine, but even at that age she knew that her mother had no idea. Her mother pulled aside a heavy basket and pulled up a section of the floor. Years later, Tayuya guessed that villages like hers usually had small places like this just in case of attack. She was quickly placed inside and told that no matter what she wasn't to say or do anything. Tayuya waited under her home. She could hear the sounds of battle outside. Cries and screams along with all kinds of things that gave her nightmares for a very long time after it. Then the door to her home opened. At first she thought it was her father, but there were many heavy footsteps. She had to cover her own mouth as she heard her mother shout and fight the men. But they were many and she had been just one. Tayuya closed her eyes wishing she could block out the sounds that came next, but she couldn't take them away from her mouth in fear. She couldn't trust herself not to make a sound. She had to hear what went on above her, until finally her mother was quiet. She felt the tears on her young face but still made no sound. She listened as they searched her home and then she waited. They left her home and she stayed. She had no idea how long she was under there. Day turned to night and finally when all she heard were the sounds of the night she crawled out. She found that she was the only survivor of that day. She found her mother and closed the door to the room. She couldn't look in there again. She found her neighbors and friends, even a young boy that she couldn't remember his name anymore, only that he brought her a flower once. She found an empty home and stayed there. The food would last for some time but not forever. She couldn't sleep for the entire night. She just huddled in a corner and held herself as her mind tried to process what happened. Her life had been destroyed that day. She found a couple of the men that had attacked her village dead. A pitchfork was in one, another had a scythe had decapitated him. They wore a strange symbol on their clothing. She took one. She wasn't sure why, only that she felt it might be important one day. She had no idea how long she had been there, or how long it had been. The place stank of death when a new group showed up. She hadn't left the village because where would she go? She had no knowledge of anything outside of the area. She had no idea where to go or what to do, so she had stayed, for the simple reason that she had nowhere else to go. When strangers entered the village dressed in strange clothing, she thought it might be them returning or another group. She waited with a knife she had found and hid herself. She wouldn't let other harm her again. She saw that one of them was alone from the others and so she ran at him. He only had the time to turn and cry out as she stabbed him. He didn't die right away but she kept on stabbed him. She was so filled with anger, pain and rage she didn't notice when he had stopped moving on the ground, when she was covered in blood or when his friends pulled her off him. "We should kill this bitch, look at what she did," one of the masked men said. "Look at her, she looks like a filthy animal," another said, who was holding her as she fought him. "Has she been here this entire time?" Another one who was looking around asked the others. "This place is dead, is she a survivor?" "Who cares?" the first said, pulling out a kunai. "She's dead." "Hold it," a calm voice said, and all of them froze immediately. It was then that she saw him for the first time. Orochimaru walked up to her and looked her in the eyes. She saw something in his eyes that made her freeze, something that was almost inhuman in his eyes as he stared into her, studying her. He grinned as he judged something about her. "So you survived and killed one of my men. I have to say that interests me. Maybe you were given a reason to live. Tell me, child, what would you do? If there is anything you want to do, what would it be?" She couldn't look away from his commanding eyes. She found herself answering him despite herself. "I want them dead. The ones that did this." I want them all to die. He chuckled at her answer and motioned for the one holding her to let go. Tell me, if I offer you the power to kill them, would you swear your loyalty to me? Would you serve me? She didn't even had to think on it, she had no life here anymore, she had nothing. This man was offering her a way to kill those that he'd taken her life. She looked up at him with a cold fire in her eyes. Yes. Present time. So did you ever find them? Sasuke asked, hearing the story. Eventually, Tayuya said to him, looking at him. It was my initiation into the Sound 4. I was to kill the entire group on my own, which was just fine to me. I waited until dark while watching them. At first I took out the people on watch easily enough. Then made my way through the small camp, there were only 50 of them anyway. I was going to make sure none of them got away. When I was ready, I used my flute to call on my 3 doki. They ran through the camp killing everyone I could find. I had set up traps in the day that when the few that fled tripped them up. I made sure that those traps were set up to ensure they would suffer before death as well. Then I found the leader of the group, the one that had ordered and led the attack on my home. I saved him for last, and when I got around to him, I had the doki pull his arms and legs off. She grinned at the memory. All the pain and suffering that man had caused in his life was paid back in full. I watched him die. He begged at first, but then he cursed me all kinds of ways. Eventually the blood loose got to him and he finally died. I went back and took my place in the team. Sasuke looked at her almost for the first time. She had avenged her past through Orochimaru, it would seem. He didn't find any lie in her story or in her words. It would also seem that Orochimaru, for whatever else he was, did deliver on his promises. That was something to think over. Konoha streets. At this moment Naruto was walking with Sakura. They had run into each other and decided to walk together since they were going the same way. It had been some time since they had hung out lately, as they were all busy it seemed. So how are things going? Sakura asked her teammate who was walking with his hands behind his head. Going great. Naruto smiled at her. Temari-chan says that pretty soon I'll be able to finally start learning wind jutsu. Although she wants to start me off small, but I'm sure that I'll get some new kick-ass jutsu. Sakura couldn't help but smile at his enthusiasm. It seems everyone is doing something these days. You and Temari are training together. Sasuke-kun is doing something. Honestly, I'm a little worried about him. Does he seem more distant lately? Naruto thought about it and nodded as he got a bit more serious. Yeah, he's starting to piss me off with his attitude lately. I mean, he just goes off alone after we're done for the day with the team. I don't see him around and hardly says anything. Sakura nodded. Sasuke was getting more and more distant, it seemed. She had no idea why. She kept trying to talk to him, but he just ignored her or said she was annoying. She thought about visiting him, but she knew that wouldn't be a good idea unless he actually invited her. She did respect his privacy enough not to try something like that. But she was stumped as to what was going on with him. Maybe he's just sulking about something, Naruto thought randomly. Or he's just secretly training. Maybe, Sakura said as they walked on. She sighed as she thought about that. You know, I've been looking up things in the library about different types of ninja. I mean, Temari is a wind user that uses her battle fans. You're a ninjutsu expert given how fast you learn high-rank jutsus. Really? He blinked. That was one of the few times she really complimented him. He grinned broadly at that. He always liked it when people complimented him. Thanks, Sakura-chan. I never really thought what type of ninja I was. I know I suck as genjutsu and my taijutsu is being improved on, thankfully. Sakura had noticed that. Yeah, but then you get to me. I don't come from some family of ninja or anything to learn from. Hey, me neither, Naruto offered. She paused to think on that. At least she had a family. Naruto didn't. Well, until he married at least. Well, what I mean is that I had no idea what kind of ninja I wanted to be. Usually you find your talents in something and train in that, but with my chakra control there is only 2 real paths for me. Either genjutsu, but Kakashi-sensei only knows how to deal with those because he has a Sharingan. Then the only other route is medical jutsu. In fact, there were a couple of other things, but she didn't like them. Plus the last mission had shown her that their team needed a medic. Kakashi had to use only basic medical skills to take care of their injuries. When they had gotten back they had to go to the hospital to get checked out. She wanted to be useful to her team, she felt like she was watching them all get farther and farther away from her. "Oh, you mean like Ba-chan?" Naruto said to her. "Naruto, you shouldn't call her that," she chided him. "Honestly, you should have more respect for the Hokage." "I will when she stops pretending she's not 50, he countered. Honestly, he didn't see the point in pretending you were younger than what you were. To him, hiding behind a genjutsu because you didn't want people to see your real age was silly. So he felt it was his duty to remind her that she wasn't young anymore. Well, that, and he knew how much it irritated her. Anyway, you think if I asked for her to train me she would?" Sakura knew that asking training from the Hokage herself was not something most people would even try. After all, what were the odds that the Hokage would agree to that? Plus the training would most likely be very intense. But she didn't care about that, she needed the training. From her time with Temari, Sakura had seen that she was behind where she should be and she needed to do something to catch up. Plus, if she was going to train as a medic, she wanted to be trained by the best so her skills would be an asset for her team. Although she was really nervous, what if the Hokage didn't train her, what would she do? Maybe she could find help elsewhere, but she really needed this. She needed to pull her own weight and be there to support her team in the best way she could, and this was the way she needed to do it. She just needed for the Hokage to see this, and then maybe hopefully she might be given a chance. Naruto noticed her worried look and smiled at her. "Hey, don't worry. Ba-chan is pretty smart and she knows good potential when she sees it. You'll just have to be honest with her and show her your determination and she'll train you." "You really think so?" Honestly, he had no idea, it just sounded good to him. Naruto was a firm believer that if you kept a positive attitude then there was nothing you can do as long as you threw in all your will behind it. It had worked for him up to this point anyway, so why change something that wasn't broken? "Of course, plus I believe in you and I know you can do this." She smiled at him. It was nice to hear that from someone. In fact, she realized that he had always been there for her and had been trying to make her feel better. She just hadn't noticed it before now. She felt a little bad not noticing him before, but she had resolved to be a better friend to him, and to let him know that they were good friends now. "Thanks, Naruto, you're a good friend, you know that." He only smiled brightly at her, chuckling a bit, just happy to hear that. Former Uchiha District. Enko walked along the deserted streets. Not many people liked to come down this way. Not that she blamed them, the sight of a massacre wasn't the type of place you wanted to live in. Many of the houses were falling into disrepair from being abandoned. Looking around, she saw that a few had been damaged in the sand invasion. A fire had caught on and had burned up a few houses before it had been put out. Thankfully no one lived in them. She heard the stories, everyone had, how the spirits of the dead haunted this place. Kids would dare others to go into the so-called haunted houses. It was kind of annoying when they had to call in ninja to deal it at times. One of the great ironies was that it used to the old Uchiha police force that usually dealt with this kind of things. She didn't remember much about that old force, but from what she heard it certainly freed up their ninja for other matters. They still hadn't been able to find a way to replace that unit, even after all these years. The only professional police force was all dead, no one was left to train the others. So they had to relearn everything that the Uchiha clan had started. There were reports and a few manuals for recruits that had been found in the old police station, but without anyone of experience to teach them. It was trial and error. Well, it wasn't her problem, she wasn't involved in anything like that, thankfully. She walked up to the only house that looked both cared for and lived in. This was obviously the place, so she walked right up to the front door. She considered what approach to use, but what was the fun in that? So she knocked on the door and waited. She knew the boy had to be here, after all she could hear something moving around in there. She sighed and waited. She mentally counted as she figured how long it was to open a damn door. So when that time came and gone, she tried to door. It was locked, of course. Not that would stop her. She pulled out her lockpicks and within seconds unlocked it. She snorted at that. As a ninja clan, you'd think the Uchiha would have invested in some decent locks. She easily opened the door and walked right in. "Hey, anyone home?" she yelled out, looking around the place. "What are you doing here?" Sasuke said, annoyed as he walked into the room. He didn't like people that just came into his home, especially since he wasn't alone. He took a moment and remembered this as that strange woman in charge of the second stage of the Chunin exams. "Why are you here?" "Kakashi asked me to talk to you, since you and I have something in common." Anko told him flat out. Sasuke scowled a bit. He didn't know that Kakashi knew this woman well enough to ask her to talk to him. He guessed that he should have seen something happen with how he had been. But honestly, he didn't see much of a difference than how he normally was, and he was busy. But what he couldn't figure out was what in the world he had in common with this strange woman. "That's why you broke into my home?" Sasuke asked of her. "Yeah, well, I got impatient. I mean, does it take you that long to answer the door?" She told him, blowing off the fact she could literally get in trouble for doing so, off like it meant nothing to her. "Look, kid, Kakashi is worried and he's wondering if it has anything to do with this." She pulled her top by her neck aside to show off her own curse mark, but with Kakashi's new and improved seal around it. Sasuke hadn't known that this woman had this as well, but then why didn't she use it? She obviously had Kakashi to something with it. Was this that new seal that he offered him earlier? It made sense on how he got it working, but still he wasn't convinced that this thing wasn't a curse. He had much more control over it now, and honestly he didn't see the problem. "Look, kid, if you are using this or not I don't want to know, so you don't have to worry about saying anything you don't want to. Just listen to the voice of experience," Anko told him seriously. "You may not know this, but Orochimaru was my Jonin sensei. He taught me a lot, although I didn't know it at the time. I was just a tool for him. You see, before he was found out he took me somewhere. I don't really remember all the details. He took a lot of memories from me somehow. It was a sore spot for her. How much he took from her she never knew. There were huge gaps in her memory and there was no telling what exactly she was missing. She spent a lot of time trying to fill in those blanks, but she knew she might never fully remember. Who knows what kind of important things to her that had been stolen from her. Anyways, he took me somewhere out of the way to put this on me." She pointed to where the seal was. "Then he just left me to die. I don't know why. If Anbu hadn't come across me I most likely would have died. I don't know why he picked me, but if I had died then no one would have found me. I was used and then tossed away. That's how he works. If you've outlived your usefulness to him you're nothing to him. This damn thing has been a literal pain in my neck since I got it. It hurts sometimes and it can mess with me in important times. I could have been killed because of this." This was very true in the case when Orochimaru had come to this village. The seal had flared up in his presence and it had nearly cost her her life. That's the thing with his gifts, they're like a snake. If you aren't careful with them, they'll bite you and you'll pay for it. And trust me, if there is anything I know it's how snakes are. Sasuke took this in, but honestly he wasn't sure even she had all the facts. She admitted to now having all her memories, and given that he was actually being trained, he had more control and the pain he hadn't felt in a long time. If she had gotten some kind of training then she most likely wouldn't have these problems. "Well, you don't have to worry about it then. If that's all you came then you can show yourself out," he told her. "Oh, one small talk and then you want to get rid of me, huh?" Anko had a feeling that there was something going on. Maybe Kakashi had been right after all. The curse mark was also seductive in a way. It offered power, but the price was just too high. Sasuke was trying to think of a way to get her out of here. The longer she stayed the more complicated things could get. She was growing suspicious and he couldn't have her looking too close into his life. There had to be some way of getting rid of her that made her think that nothing was going on. "Sasuke-kun tilde," a very familiar female voice called out that made the boy's eyes bulge out. What the hell is she thinking? He mentally yelled out as he turned to look and stood there shocked. Chiyuya came around the corner only in a bath towel that barely covered her body. "The bath will be getting cold, so I thought, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know Sasuke-kun had company." She quickly hid herself behind the corner looking like a blushing teenager that had been caught by her parents. Anko blinked a few times before laughing. "This is what's going on. Geez, kid, didn't know you had a girl over. Damn, looks like the betting pool on your sexuality is done. Given how many girls threw themselves at you, people were starting to talk. What's your name, girl?" To Yuya miss, she did a really great job of sounding meek at the moment. Please you're not going to tell my parents are you? Anko smirked at this. Oh Kakashi was going to love this. Nah, don't worry about it, in fact I'll leave you two to it. Guess you really do want to keep the clan going huh? She winked at Sasuke before letting herself out. When she was long gone he glared at her. What the hell was that all about? Why I thought she needed a reason to know why you were being so secretive Sasuke-kun, she said still in her sweat-teen voice. Knock that off. Fine with me asshole, she stated going back to normal. You think I like stripping myself like this? I have my pride you know, but look at it this way. At least now you have a cover story, so people won't be thinking you're doing something strange. She'll most likely tell your sensei about this and he'll leave it at that, or at least he should. She had to admit it was quick thinking on her part. Not many even knew what she looked like in this village, so she was pretty safe there. She had been surprised to learn that this woman had the curse seal. From the sounds of it she was one of the first test groups, which one she had no idea, but it was certainly interesting. She also noticed the slight blush on the boy as he tried not to look at her. She grinned. It was kind of funny, the big bad Uchiha was still just a boy after all. What's the matter? You haven't seen a naked girl before. Chiyuya laughed. Like you'd know what the fuck to do with one anyway. Now Sasuke openly glared at the girl. The hell is that supposed to mean? Oh please you don't think I haven't heard all the stories while I've been out? She said to him getting closer. She pretty much said it, all those girls and you never picked out one. So what, the almighty Uchiha clan dies with you huh? What a sad end, so you just can't get it up, or you just fucking gay or something? I have a responsibility to both avenge my clan and ensure that when I do plan to revive my clan I have to pick the right woman. He shouted at her. This girl was infuriating at times, he just couldn't understand it. She has to be strong and have the makings of a great ninja. I don't want some weak girl that can't do anything. Huh, sounds like that temari girl again. Looks like you missed out on that. The other girls I've seen in this village are a joke. Chiyuya had seen females of their age and she was disgusted by them. Only the Chunin level ones seemed to have grown out of whatever it was that made girls in this village so weak. Too bad, if you stay you'll have to pair up with some airhead. I weep for any children from that union. Oh, and you think maybe Sound has anything to offer? Sasuke asked her. I remember that kin girl, she wasn't much, hell she was taken out by that Nara boy. Chiyuya hadn't known kin, at least not personally, but she had served Orochimaru to the fullest in the end. You bastard, she died for our village and for Orochimaru. She gripped him by his shirt and the next thing she knew he pushed her back up against a wall. He held her there with her arms pinned to her sides and her towel fell. Both froze at that moment as they locked eyes. Go ahead and peek you little fucker, she sneered at him. I doubt it will be the only thing you can do to a woman. Don't you ever shut up, he told her, and he wasn't sure why, but he thought of a way to silence her. He surprised her by smashing his mouth to hers. At first she didn't do anything, but she figured anything to seduce him would work, so she went with it. She didn't mean to actually enjoy it. That was a surprise. It wasn't kind or soft or anything you'd find in some cheap romance novel. It was more animalistic. All the heat in their argument seemed to transfer into it. He growled into her mouth and she returned it, feeling her body go on fire for a moment. Then he suddenly pulled away. He took a breath and then smirked at her. So that's how to keep you quiet. She blushed as she pushed him off her and quickly went to get her clothing. Fucker, she yelled at him, but she couldn't forget the heat on her lips. Sasuke for his part sat down thinking on what he did. He couldn't find her attractive, did he? She was loud, had a dirty mouth, they fought and things were heated. But she didn't back down from him. She was strong and knew the kind of pain he did. As he sat there he was just too confused on what to think at the moment, but he knew things might get more complicated from now on. Sasuke wasn't looking forward to the day he hadn't slept well, as his mind kept going back to that moment with Chiyuya. Things were awkward around them that morning as well, as they both avoided the other. Maybe a line had been crossed, but why did he kept going back to that moment? Honestly, it had been to just shut her up, but it didn't make sense to actually enjoy it. At any rate, although he left his home to join his team, it wasn't a break from it. Knowing that Kakashi had asked Anko to talk to him, and what she had seen, he had a good idea that Kakashi would know he had a naked girl at his place. He sighed as he thought about that problem on the way to the training field. On the one hand, it was a damn annoyance to deal with this. He knew Kakashi might call him out on it, if nothing else but as just joking around. On the other hand, if word got around that he was seeing someone, maybe it would stop all those girls. Not one day went by when someone tried to give him something, ask him for dates or other things. They just couldn't get it, that he just wasn't interested in them. So he figured if he played along with this whole farce he could get some peace at least from girls constantly bugging him for dates. He walked into the field to see Sakura, Temari and Naruto already there. No surprised when Sakura waved to him and said a good morning to him. He was looking forward to stopping her constant fawning over him. Honestly, she didn't know the first thing about him, they hardly knew each other and he didn't have any romantic feelings for her. So why did she constantly try and gain his affections? At least lately she was training more so she wouldn't be useless on missions. He noticed Naruto and Temari together as usual and Tayuya's words from earlier came back. Looking at the taller female he had to think that she might have had a point about Temari. She was a very good ninja, better than any of the other females their own age in this village that is. As the last Uchiha he thought that any political marriage would have used him. He wasn't sure how he felt about her, but she at least had skills he could respect and was strong. But who did they chose? Looking at the blonde-haired boy next to her goofing off and showing off for Temari, who was trying not to smile at his antics, Sasuke couldn't help but feel that whoever came up with this idea was brain dead. That or they didn't know Naruto well enough. Honestly, the guy was the dead last, an idiot, had no sense of the word subtle either. Yet they picked Naruto over him. That was what really ticked off Sasuke. He had been passed over for Naruto. That was the thing that really pissed him off about the whole issue. The dead last was picked over the Uchiha. It was an insult now that he thought about it. Sasuke's dark mood didn't go unnoticed by the others. What the hell is his problem today? Naruto sighed as he was balancing himself on a tree branch as they waited for Kakashi. I mean, he always seems to have a stick up his ass about something. Temari cast a look to Sasuke and frowned. She had seen it too. In fact, he had been getting more and more moody lately. Hard to believe she once thought him handsome when they first met at the Chunin exams. Now that she got to know him, she was kind of thankful that the elders of both villages choose Naruto. She didn't want to think what kind of cold and emotionless marriage she might have been trapped in. Hey Sakura-chan, what did Ba-chan say? Naruto asked their pink-haired teammate. Oh, she said that she would agree to train me. Sakura smiled, seeing the surprised looks from Temari and even Sasuke, who overheard this. I went to the Hokage yesterday and asked her if she would personally train me. I did my best to convince her that I wanted to be a medic, and I guess it worked. She's going to train me when I have spare time and when I'm not on missions or with the team. Wow, that's impressive. Temari wasn't kidding. Being trained by the legendary Tsunade herself was a big deal. Her name was known far and wide in the ninja world for good reason. Learning from her personally would most likely be intense but well worth the experience. Temari smiled approvingly at Sakura. Well, that's a good step in your training. I guess this means no extra training from me. Sakura bowed her head a bit to Temari to show her respect for the older girl. I know, but I want to thank you for everything anyway. I learned a lot from you and I hope to one day be as strong as you are. With Tsunade, you might end up being stronger. Temari wasn't sure how far Sakura would go, but under Tsunade there was just no telling what the young girl would be able to accomplish. Sasuke meanwhile was nearly floored. Now Sakura was getting special training. Sakura, the weakest member of their team, was going to train under the Hokage. He would have laughed at this if he could. The bitter taste of acid filled his mouth and stomach as he seemed to be passed over yet again. He needed training to fight and kill Itachi. Did no one in this village cared that the man that murdered the entire clan that helped found this village still walked free? Years had gone by, and what had this village done? Put his brother in a bingo book, and that was pretty much it. It made him sick. His clan helped created this village. They were the police force. They had been the backbone of this village for a time, and what did that earn the Uchiha? Nothing. Where were the Anbu when his family and clan were being slaughtered? Where was the justice for what had been done? He had to avenge his clan because no one else seemed to be up for the task, but how was he supposed to meet his brother without the proper training? It wasn't like he wanted to be a medic, but Tsunade could in theory teach him things that he could use. That monstrous strength, if he could learn it, was a prime example. But it was all going to Sakura. If being passed over by Naruto was an insult, this was a slap in the face to him. "Ah, good, you're all here." Kakashi's voice broke everyone out of their thoughts as they viewed the lazy Jonin. "You're late," Naruto and Sakura said in unison as usual. Truth was, he was only an hour late, so it wasn't too bad, but still he was late. Kakashi smiled and rubbed the back of his head. "Yeah, sorry about that. I had a run-in with a friend who told me something interesting." He cast a look to Sasuke. Sasuke felt the man was grinning. It was hard to tell with the mask, but he figured to get it out there. "Just get it over with. I knew she would tell you what she saw." "Well, it is juicy news." Kakashi smiled again as he nearly giggled at the thought. "What's going on?" Naruto asked, jumping off the tree. "Is there something going on?" Kakashi looked to Sasuke, who just sighed and nodded before facing the other way. Kakashi looked to his other students. "It seems like you're not the only one with someone, Naruto. I asked a friend to talk to Sasuke about something. Turns out I might have been worried for nothing." He cast a look to Sasuke. "You know, if you wanted to get home early to visit that girlfriend of yours, you just had to say so. We could have worked something out." "Girlfriend," was the single reaction out of the other three members of the team. Sakura looked to Sasuke. She felt like her heart was breaking. She was trying so hard to be stronger, to be a better ninja. Yes, it was primarily for the team, but a part of her had hoped that he would also take notice of her. Now he had someone. There were so many questions. Who was this girl? When did this all start? Why hadn't it been her? Suddenly her good mood in being trained by the Hokage didn't seem as happy anymore. She felt like someone was ripping her heart in two. All this time, she had hoped that maybe it could be possible, but was everything she had sacrificed, her friendship with Ino, her training that she should have done. All the years trying to get him to notice her as a girl, it all just seemed like a waste in that moment. "What the hell, man?" Naruto said to the dark-haired boy. "Since when did you get one?" "What does it matter?" Sasuke told him. "My personal life is just that, personal." "Well, what about?" He paused as he cast a quick look to Sakura. He could see how hurt she was by this. It was no secret that she must have liked Sasuke as much as he had before temari entered his life. A bit of him still did care. She was his first crush, even if temari was his greatest love. So had also become a better friend to him recently, and he didn't like to see his friends hurt. "Well, what about what?" Sasuke asked him. Naruto wanted to say something about how Sakura felt about him, but he felt a hand on his shoulder. He looked to see temari shaking her head slightly. She knew what he was going to say, but the last thing Sakura needed was to bring in that. She cast the younger girl a sympathetic look. She had never had her heart broken like this before. Naruto was her first and only real relationship in her life. The only real loss she had was her mother. Well, there was her father, but honestly the man was only a father in name, really. "So who is she?" Sakura asked, surprising the two blondes. "Just someone I met recently." Sasuke didn't want to give too much away. He figured the less they knew the better. It was the usual D-rank missions, deliveries with needing to paint a fence. Naruto of course got covering in paint. Temari had smirked at it, and he had the bright idea to take some of the paint on his fingers and wipe them on her cheek. This led into a retaliation by her, and soon both were being covered in paint, although temari, while a bit mad at being so messy, had to admit she enjoyed it. After that they broke for the day. Since Naruto and temari needed to get cleaned up, they were all for it. Sakura said she had to meet the Hokage for training at any rate and made a simple goodbye. The entire day had been hard on her. She tried to not look at Sasuke, but every time she did she felt a pang of sorrow in her heart. This left Kakashi and Sasuke alone for a moment, and the Uchiha wanted to ask their Jonin-sensei something. Kakashi was about to leave himself before he noticed Sasuke looking at him. He could tell the young man had something to ask of him. "Yes. I need extra training," Sasuke told him. "If the others are done, I want to train some more. I need work on the Sharingan, and you're the only person that could teach me anything." Kakashi sighed. In all honesty, he was kind of tired and was looking forward to a nice relaxing read. Plus all in all, Kakashi had to learn much of the Sharingan by trial and error, as he wasn't allowed to read any of the Uchiha scrolls on the subject. He knew a few genjutsus with the eye, how the basics worked, but there was supposed to be special abilities found in each eye, unique to that person. Kakashi never did figure out what Obito's might have been. There might have been hints in the Uchiha scrolls, but he was fine with what he knew. Honestly, I'm not sure what else I can teach you, Kakashi admitted to the boy. There are a few things, but I think once you get the basics down, it's all up to you to figure out the rest. Plus I don't know everything about it. Sasuke didn't look pleased with that. Then how about something else? A new jutsu or something? Kakashi sighed. This was the same old thing with him, always asking for more. Didn't he get enough when they trained for a full month together? The boy still wanted more and more power, and he kept telling him that he had enough. Honestly, at the point you are now, the only thing you can do is train up what you have. You have already an impressive amount of skills for a genin. It's best to sharpen those and improve them. If you only focus on more and more techniques, they won't be very strong or effective. Plus now that you're in a relationship, you don't want to keep your lady friend waiting. He smiled before turning into a puff of smoke. Sasuke couldn't believe that he had just been blown off like that. If he had been angry before, he was getting close to livid right now. He made his way to his home in a foul mood as his mind started to think on what possible future he had in this village. Uchiha compound. Chiyuya was having just as hard a time as Sasuke was with both lack of sleep and dealing with what happened yesterday. She was irritable as she kept tossing and turning in the night, her mind refusing to let her rest. But no, her mind kept replaying yesterday all night long. Worse was in the morning, she couldn't even look at him in the eye. She hated this. She wasn't the type to be like this. It made no sense. Why was she like this? She spent the entire day trying to keep busy and to take her mind off things. But she couldn't. It just kept crawling in there, and she was near the point of pulling her hair out and screaming in frustration. If her team could see her now, they would laugh at her. The supposedly strong Chiyuya, acting like such a girl. It was kind of sickening to her, but she was having a hard enough time as it was without thinking of what they would say about it. So she spent the entire day with her mood going worse and worse as time went on. She cleaned up the room she was staying in. She even nearly started to clean up the house, but suddenly realized this wasn't her house and why should she clean it? So she was bored. She tried to spend the time training, but her concentration was off. Eventually she just went to the bathroom for a long soak in some hot water. She tried to relax as the warm water soothed her body. She tried to think on things and wonder how she got herself into this fix. Sure, Orochimaru told her to do whatever it took, but she wasn't supposed to feel anything if she did try this out. She tried to be reasonable. This was just some physical thing, that was all she figured. But still, it was annoying. It was distracting, and she couldn't afford to be distracted. Since the hot bath wasn't working like it should, she got out and drained the water. Drying off, she put on a robe and figured to get dressed in her room. She got into the hall still in an irritated mood and saw that she wasn't alone anymore. Sasuke was standing there also in just as bad a mood as she was, although he paused at the state of dress she was in. Her long red hair was still somewhat damp and clung to her body, and the robe was opened enough to see a leg and part of her cleavage. He must have been looking a bit too hard as one of her hands came up to close the gap in her robe, her face slightly flushed. "What the fuck are you looking at?" she yelled at him. "Oh please, I bet you planned for that just like yesterday." Sasuke shot back, feeling like he needed to get his frustration out on something. "What the fuck is that supposed to mean? Like I don't know that female ninja are supposed to seduce their targets." "Oh please, like you would know what to do with a woman," Chiyuya shot back, smirking at him. "You kiss like a little boy." "What was that?" Sasuke said darkly. He had been simmering all day, and the last thing he was going to allow was to let this foul-mouthed girl badmouth him. He already felt like the entire village had slighted him. He wasn't going to let his house guest do the same thing. "Maybe I just felt sorry for you. After all, who would want a foul-mouthed little girl that didn't know what she was doing anyway?" She ground her teeth at the dark-haired boy. "Little girl. I'll have you know that I'm at least a year older than you." She was right up in his face now, a finger poking his chest. He didn't like that, so he quickly grabbed her wrist. Let go of my wrist or I'll spoil those fucking good looks of yours so you won't have to worry about women throwing themselves at you. Oh, so now I'm good looking, huh? He smirked at her. Too bad you're not my type. Oh, and what's that? A competent ninja, or do you actually like those useless little girls all over you? Or do you really have a thing for the guys? Wouldn't that be the biggest joke in the world? She laughed at him. The last Uchiha who has to rebuild his clan, but oh wait, he can't because he likes boys. Sasuke had enough of people laughing at his clan for one day, plus there was only one way to shut up this foul-mouthed redhead. He pushed her against a wall to her surprise and kissed her again. Despite herself, she responded in kind. It wasn't about love or crushes or anything, it was pure animal instinct that seemed to take over them. They went at each other like they were trying to devour each other. Yuya had no idea what was going on, only that one moment they were yelling at each other and now she was sucking the air out of his lungs. She felt like she was burning inside. She hadn't felt this fire before in her life, but it was hard to resist. Sasuke didn't know what was going on either, only that the entire day had been stressful and irritating. He needed something else to focus on, something that he could let out all his built-up emotions. Something exploded inside of him that moment and he just couldn't stop himself. Before he knew it, they nearly crashed through the door to her room. He gave no mind as his body seemed to work as if on autopilot. He pushed her down onto the bed, but she didn't give up that easily as she quickly threw him onto his back and attacked him as well. This wasn't anything gentle, this was more primal, animalistic, as she nearly ripped off his top. She saw that he might grow into a fine figure one day. He was on his way, that much was for sure, as she ran her hands over his exposed flesh. There was no love-making here, this was pure raw passionate sex in the most carnal senses. It was like an animal had been released from both of them as they tore each other's clothing off and went at it with wild abounded lust. When Yuya woke up, it was still night by the looks of things. She turned to look on the other side of the bed to see Sasuke was sitting facing the window. She sighed as she wondered if this had even been a good idea to begin with. It was stupid, and now what was she going to do? She sat up facing away from him as she thought of what to say now. Did he regret what they did? Did she? That was something she wasn't sure about. She was still feeling really confused right now about all of this. You said that Orochimaru can give me the power I need, right? Sasuke asked her, knowing she was awake. Yes, she told him as she looked over her shoulder at him. He was silent, looking through the window as he was coming to terms with something. You know, I was told all these stories about my clan. How before there were villages, they were one of the greatest of clans. One of the most feared and respected in the world. How with the first Hokage they created this village, became the police force for this village since the start. I was brought up in that environment. Everyone respected my clan, everyone looked up to the Uchiha. I was so proud to be an Uchiha, I still am. But you know what I recently have come to terms with? This village owes my clan so much, and when they were slaughtered they did nothing. I need to avenge my clan and rebuild it, and I'm overlooked. Everyone is growing and learning more, hell even Sakura is getting training from the Hokage myself. They even paired Naruto of all people up with Temari for this marriage, and I know what kinds of things are expected from that. I need power, and today I asked Kakashi for more training. To help me with understanding my Sharingan or anything else, but he blew me off. Sasuke clenched his teeth, remembering that. You, however, are the only person that is offering to give me what I need. The only person offering to give me the power I need to take down Itachi. He looked at her and she was surprised by the intensity of his look. I'm going to ask you this once. Will Orochimaru give me the power I need for my revenge like he gave you, and will I be able to take down Itachi? Yuya nodded. Yes, although he wants you to be a host for him, by now he's already most likely picked a new one. You'll have 3 years to train under him and kill Itachi before you have to uphold your end of the bargain. Sasuke thought about it. 3 years was a lot of time to train, and it could be possible. Orochimaru was one of the Sannin, there was no telling what he could learn under him. Although even if this was able to complete his revenge, there was still the question of the restoration of his clan. He looked to Yuya, maybe there was hope for that as well. But he would have to see where things went, but he felt his choice was clear to him. If I choose to go with you, how long will it take to make preparations to leave? Do you need to send some kind of signal or can we leave right now? He asked her. She blinked for a moment before grinning. She got up and looked through her clothing and picked up a piece of paper she kept on her persons at all times. She opened the paper and with a kunai she pulled from her clothing too and made a small cut on her finger. She ran the blood across the paper as a seal showed up. Soon it disappeared. This was a signal summoning seal that she had been given. She wasn't sure how it worked, only that it had something to do with Orochimaru's summoned snakes. She had been on the receiving end of these. A snake would show up among them with a message or just some kind of symbol which they were looking for. This was to signal the rest of her team that they were coming and to get ready. They were camping far enough away to keep out of sight of any patrols, but close enough that they would get to them easily enough if they kept a fast pace. There, my team will be waiting for us, and if you really want to do this, we do it now. Then I'll pack, we leave tonight. He told her. You sure about this? Once you leave there is no turning back. She warned him. He paused a moment before putting on his clothing. There's nothing for me here. Sound Village. In one of his chambers, the leader of the Sound Village, Orochimaru, was resting up. The underground base was like all the others. Rock walls made out of the ground, cold, and had many tunnels all over the place. The room lit only by candlelight showed Orochimaru all wrapped up in bandages. The new body was working out well so far, he just hated the time it took to make the modifications he needed to them. At least this time he was back in a male body, not that he really cared, but the few female bodies he had inhabited took more modifications. The first time that he took a female host it was an adjustment period, getting used to it. Plus he had to get rid of certain other problems that only females have. He didn't want to deal with that. After all, he would only use the body for a few years before shedding it away. There was really no point in having to deal with those issues while using it for that small amount of time. But the new body was a freedom for also the pain he had been inflicted with. The arms of his previous body slowly rotting away, that had been unpleasant to say the least. Now he had no more of that hellish pain racking his body at every waking moment. Plus he could use his hands again. The time he spent unable to do the simplest of things with his hands had been a great humiliation to him. He flexed his hands as he tried to get a feel for them. It would take time to break in the new body, but time is something he now had plenty of. There was a knock on his door as Kabuto entered. The snake summon from Tayuya has been sent. Ah, excellent, Orochimaru grinned. The rest of the Sound Four would already be on their way to meet up with them. He had hoped that the transfer to Sasuke could have gone earlier, but no matter. He would have the Sharingan. I had to admit it took her a bit longer than I thought to get him to leave. You sound so sure that she would have accomplished her mission, Kabuto asked his master. Truth was he didn't think much of the girl. She was strong for her age, but beyond a good fighter he didn't see her as being one that could convince anyone of anything. I planned things out from the start, Orochimaru smirked behind the bandages. You see, you must never underestimate how basic needs, desires and instincts are always playing inside of humans. People try to think they are above animals, and although people are more complex, they still fall back on their basic needs. The girl's past would help make it seem that Sasuke-kun isn't alone in the world, that there is someone else that knows his pain and can understand. That would help open the door, and knowing her, she would have told him in order to gain some trust. Although she's not in the least diplomatic, there is another thing I worked on. Did you give her the injections I asked before she left? Of course, and I have been wondering, what did you have me give her? Kabuto asked him. He had only been given 2 vials to inject into the girl. He hadn't seen the compound before, obviously one of Orochimaru's experiments. Orochimaru chuckled. You see, like animals, people respond to certain stimuli. Although they are not aware of it, there are things such as the scent of pheromones that get registered. One of them was to help her increase this amount, making her more desirable. A love potion. Kabuto smirked as he said it. It sounded kind of childish to say it out loud. Hardly. This is science, not fantasy, Orochimaru said, annoyed. You see, the pheromones would only open the door one way. She was told to try and get close and keep close to him, What she didn't realize was that she was slowly overloading his senses. He won't be able to resist his primal urges after some time, all it will need is some kind of trigger. And you know what the greatest thing is? He could actually form an attachment to the girl because of it. Controls are very important for a leader to have over those that follow him. I need insurance to have some leverage over the boy. And the second one? Kabuto asked, now interested. A solution that was similar, it would heighten her sexual desires slowly as well. Against an emotional attachment could be formed. Like I said, leverage is a very important thing, and although she is totally loyal, it doesn't hurt to add more control now and then. Although I had a feeling she would do anything to get him to join us, I wanted to be sure. Kabuto had to admit that Orochimaru was one to play on people's desires and weaknesses. It was like his master could see a person's weakness and use that to his advantage with no morals to get in the way either. If you want to ensure that Sasuke-kun joins us, are you not worried that the Leaf will make a pursuit team? Orochimaru considered that for a moment. It was sure that Konoha wouldn't let their only Uchiha left to just run off. Although the rest of the Sound Four would be on the way, they might be overpowered if Konoha could send a good enough force. You might be right, Orochimaru conceded. Here is what I want you to do. Konoha. Sakura yawned as she slowly made her way home. She had just finished with her training. Right after she left her group, she had met with the Hokage for physical training. Or as Sakura called it, learning to survive to see the end of the day. She was sure she would be feeling a lot of her new training tomorrow. After that, she was taken to where she would learn the medical side to her training. Shizune had helped to overlook her with the Hokage got busy. Mainly it was just all theory right now. Once she had a working knowledge, she would be put that into practice. There was so much information and she had only just scratched the surface of it all. But she was glad for this chance. She knew that she could become a useful member for her team at this point. She felt that she had made the right choice after all. It was pretty dark out. Thankfully, she told her parents that she would be coming home late tonight after dinner. Sakura wasn't sure what she wanted to do first, a hot bath or just go straight to bed. Both sounded nice to her at this moment, but she would decide when she got home. She looked around. Hardly anyone was around. All the shops were closed up and only the late-night clubs or bars which were deeper in the village were open. Currently she was on the main road from one of the massive gates that ran through the center of the village. This was the quickest path to get home, but also the most barren. Not one person would be on this road at this hour, she bet. All the homes were further away, so there was no need for someone to be on this path. So you could imagine her confusion when she noticed two people walking towards her. At first, because of the dark and the light the street lights were giving, which wasn't much, she couldn't make out who at first. Then it was Sasuke, but the person next to him she didn't know. It was a girl, that much she could tell in the low light, one with long red hair. At first she stopped as they noticed her. Sakura thought that this girl must be the girlfriend she was told about. She looked a bit older. Was that the type that he looked for, older girls? It might explain why no girl in their class had ever caught his eye, but then she noticed something else. They were both carrying packs. Not only that, she noticed the girl wore shoes that only ninja wear. But she never had seen this girl in the village before. While Sakura's mind was taking all this in, Sasuke had cursed his luck. When he saw someone coming, he had hoped it wouldn't be anyone that knew him, at least personally knew him. Of all people, it had to be Sakura. If it was a stranger, then they might not have noticed or bluffed his way by them. He could already tell that she was making conclusions on what she was seeing. Despite all her weaknesses, she was smart, too smart sometimes. This going to be a problem? Chiyuya asked him, feeling the tension building up. Let me handle this, Sasuke told her. Sasuke-kun, what's going on? Sakura asked him. Why are you with this person and why are you two packed as though you're leaving the village? She wasn't sure what was going on, but something really didn't feel right. We're going to a romantic getaway, so you can just go along now, Chiyuya said to Sakura as she placed her arm around Sasuke's. She could feel Sasuke's glare as he wanted to handle things, but honestly this was just too fun. This was obviously some girl that had some crush or something on Sasuke. Well, time for the girl to learn he was off the market and leave. Sakura noticed how Sasuke gave a small glare, but he didn't remove his arm from hers or any of the other things he normally did when a girl tried something like that. He didn't even call the redhead a name or something, saying that she was being annoying or anything else. She knew that he was seeing someone, but knowing about it and seeing it were just two separate things. She hadn't even came to terms that all her efforts had been wasted, then this comes out in front of her. But despite this, there was no way that Sasuke had permission to leave the village. You couldn't just leave just like that, even if it was to visit a visiting town you needed to fill out a location form. This was to keep track of their ninja, and also if someone went missing, then they had a place to start looking. It was a security feature that all villages used just in case something happened. But even if he did, Team 7 would have been informed, and he certainly wouldn't be leaving in the middle of the night like this. It was like he was trying to avoid being seen, but that wouldn't make sense. None of this made sense to her. "Go home, Sakura," Sasuke told her as he and Tayuya started to walk past her. "This doesn't concern you." Sakura watched as he walked by her with that girl hanging on his arm. Something in her just snapped. All the emotions she had been bottling up, all pain and uncertainty just couldn't be contained anymore. "Sasuke-kun, wait," Sakura yelled out, making the two stop. "Please, I don't understand what's going on. Why have you been so distant lately? Why are you with this girl? Why are you two leaving in the middle of the night? Please, I want to know, I have to know. Don't you know that we care about you, that I care about you?" "Oh, I think I'm going to be sick," Tayuya said as she unlinked her arm to glare at the younger girl. "What next? You're going to say you're in love with him or something? What a joke you are." Sakura's fist clenched in her hands. I do love him. I love him more than anything, more than you ever would." "Please, you don't know the first thing about him," Tayuya told her with a sneer. "You can't understand his pain, what he's going through and what he needs. You say you love him. You don't even know the meaning of the word. You're just some silly little girl playing ninja while trying to make the boy you have a crush on fall for you. What? You got some silly fantasy life built around it already." "Shut up. Who the hell are you anyway?" Sakura could feel the hot tears starting to fall. Her heart was breaking and she needed to know why her heart had to suffer. "I try so hard to have him open up to me so I could understand him. I don't like him in pain, and I try so hard for him to see me." Tayuya wanted to laugh at how pathetic this was. "Well, that right there proves my point. You'll never understand him because unless you know his pain he'll never open up. I do, and I'm giving him everything he needs, while you just hold him back." "That's not true," Sakura said weakly. She knew she was the weak link in the team, but she was trying her hardest to be better. "Sakura, stop this," Sasuke said, not even looking at her. "You're just embarrassing yourself." "Sasuke-kun," Sakura said softly. "This village had done nothing for me but hold me back. I see this now," he told her. "This village holds nothing for me anymore. I need to be strong and I can't do this here." "Why you're leaving?" Sakura came to the realization of what was going on. He was leaving with this girl. She wasn't sure why, but she knew she had to be the reason why he was saying such things. "Please don't go. I need you here. Please, I love you too much." "God, you're sickening," Tayuya said to her. "You said you love him again and yet you think that's going to change anything. Here's a little information for you. Just a couple of hours ago we got done having sex. How's that grab you?" Sakura looked on horrified at the woman. "That's right," Tayuya smirked, seeing the pain on the other girl's face. "I gave myself to him and he accepted. You want to know what he's like in bed? Shall I tell you the sounds he makes or what he likes to do?" "Shut up," Sakura shouted out, closing her eyes, not wanting to hear this. She had been wanting for Sasuke to be her first everything. Her first love, her first kiss, her first time, but this girl got there before her. For some reason Sasuke wanted this stranger more than a girl that tried everything to gain his heart. "Don't make this any more difficult," Sasuke told her, giving her a cold look over his shoulder. I won't let you go," Sakura yelled out. She knew that if he left he would never see him again, plus what would happen to his status if he abandoned the village. He would be labeled as a missing nin, he would be hunted for his entire life. She had to yell out to get someone to hear her and stop this from happening. Just before she yelled, the wind was knocked out of her. She tried to gasp for air after Tayuya's fist left her stomach. The older girl grabbed her hair and sent another few shots to Sakura's ribs. Sakura was still too weak from her training to put up any kind of fight. Her arms were already feeling sluggish, and without the air and the pain it was hard to make them move at all. She was thrown to the ground as she managed to cough as an arm held her stomach. "You know, it's girls like you that pretend to be ninja that just piss me the fuck off," Tayuya said with a kick to the ribs. She was sure she heard a crack as at least one of them broke. Sakura cried out in pain as her body was racked in pain. "Shall I kill her?" Sasuke thought about it. Sakura was a very annoying girl, but she had been on his team and she had proved useful a few times. She had defended him when he was unconscious in the Forest of Death, so maybe this would be his way to even the scales. He didn't want to owe anyone anything, so he considered this his payment for that. Just knock her out, we're wasting time with her. "TCK, fine," Tayuya said and gave a kick to Sakura's head. Leaving the pink-haired girl on the ground beaten and slightly bloodied, Tayuya knew that when the girl woke up she would hardly be able to stand, and if she had dislocated the jaw, the girl wouldn't be able to talk for a bit. Although she wasn't sure about the jaw thing, she could try again, but Sasuke was right, they needed to leave. The two of them left her there as they made their way to the main gate. They picked this moment because the lookouts would be getting tired and bored, plus they knew how to cross the protection field without alerting the village. With the night covering their tracks, it would be morning before they knew what was going on. Morning, Uzumaki residence. Temari woke up in their bed feeling good. She slowly became aware of her husband sleeping against her. She was on her side with him behind her, an arm around her waist. She couldn't stop the smile that formed on her face as she closed her eyes and enjoyed his warmth. She could feel his breathing on her neck, which tickled a bit, but she didn't mind that either. Honestly, at this moment she felt like she wanted to sleep in for once. They weren't supposed to meet up with their team until the afternoon, and she figured that she could sleep in. After all, they were all kept busy to help the village recover. That made her feel a pang of guilt, knowing what Suna had been tricked into doing to this village and itself. She had slowly come to see this village as her second home, and as she got used to it and meeting new people, she felt a sense of ease here. In Suna, in such a hostile environment, the people were a bit different. Because in the desert every day out there could be a fight for survival, but that was not so here. Maybe that was why so many felt that the Leaf were weak, because they lived in a pleasant area with no worries over things like water or the environment. But that was just what others wanted to see. In actuality, the village was very closely knit together. Everyone worked with everyone. It was no wonder that teamwork was a major teaching in this village for its ninja. That they were stronger together than on their own, but right now none of that mattered to her. Right now she just wanted to sleep in her comfortable bed with Naruto with her. Of course, whatever god or gods were listening to her thoughts chose that moment to torment her. A knocking on the door was heard and she growled in frustration. She checked the clock by the bed and it was still too early for visitors. Whoever it was, she hoped it was just someone trying to sell something and then would go away if she ignored it. But it didn't stop. In fact, the next knocks were louder. She sighed as she got out of the bed, casting a look at Naruto, who was still asleep. She really was envious at how deep he could sleep at times. Putting on a robe, she marched angrily down the stairs, hoping that whoever it was had better have a good excuse. She was having a good morning and now it was ruined. She swung open the door angrily just before the person knocked again. "What?" She snapped at the person before realizing who it was. It was a masked Anbu officer who flinched at her voice. "I'm sorry, Uzumaki-san, but the Hokage requested you to her office as soon as possible and to dress for a mission." For a moment she blinked, wondering at what he called her before mentally slapping her head. She kept on forgetting her name change. It was still something she was getting used to, as not many people called her that, usually just Temari. A mission already? Temari couldn't believe her luck. Did she disrespect a shrine or a Buddha statue at some point? She didn't think so, but whatever had cursed her she would find out and deal with it. This was getting ridiculous. "I'm sorry, but I wasn't told the specifics," he said to her. "Only to get you both to the tower." "All right, we'll be there as fast as possible," Temari told him. The masked man nodded and then disappeared. She wasn't sure if he had been a shadow clone or just that thing Kakashi did sometimes when he made a quick exit. Either way, something major had to be going on. You don't just get woken up early in the morning for nothing. She sighed. Maybe they could grab something to eat on the way there. It would have to be something small and she would need some coffee. She raced up the stairs to the bedroom. Naruto, wake up and get ready, we have a mission. Huh, Naruto said groggily as he rubbed an eye. What? He felt something hit his face as he pulled it off, seeing it was Temari's sleepwear. That got him more awake as he looked to see his young wife stripping naked. Hurry up, we need to shower and get something to eat, and it will save time if we both jump in, Temari said in a practical manner. Even if there was a slight blush on her face, but she couldn't think on that. They had a mission, although she made a mental note to make it a cold one to prevent either of them having any ideas. Yeah, okay. Naruto wasn't sure what was going on. He only heard mission and shower together. He gulped as he tried to get undressed, wondering what was going on. One cold shower later and some toast in her mouth and Naruto slurping the last of an instant ramen cup, they were running towards the Hokage Tower. She was grateful that Naruto had taken the time to make 2 shadow clones to make a quick breakfast and get their clothing and gear ready. Temari was cursing that she didn't get her morning coffee while Naruto was still complaining about how they had to use a cold shower. Naruto threw away the ramen cup in a public garbage can before they entered the tower and made their way into the Hokage's office. The door was already opened and they saw Tsunade was there with Shizune, but what was really surprised was Sakura sitting in a chair talking to someone who was drawing an image. Ba-chan, this better be important, Naruto said, irritated that he had to get up early. He liked sleeping in when he could, and he actually liked it when Temari was with him too. Tsunade gave him a serious look. This wasn't the look she normally gave him, this was the look of the Hokage. Now that he looked around, he felt a certain tension in the room. He could tell that Temari was feeling it as well. Sakura looked a little ragged as well, and she seemed to be favoring her side slightly in the chair. Although Sakura's injuries had mostly been healed, her body was still sore. The bruise on the side of her face was taken care of, but her ribs needed time to heal naturally. They were knitted together now. Apparently one of them had been broken and another fractured slightly. Still, the physical pain she might be in was nothing to the pain she felt in her heart. Sasuke had left them, had left her. She had told him that she loved her. She opened her heart and had it crushed. That's all I can remember, Sakura finished, sounding very odd to Naruto. It was like she was depressed or something, but what could it be? He couldn't remember seeing her like this in his life. A man nodded his head as he finished his drawing and then flipped it over for Sakura to take a look at. Is this accurate? Sakura took a look as her jaw tightened a bit at the image. Yeah, that's her. Tsunade looked at the image as she sighed and turned to Naruto and Temari. Well, while we're waiting for Anbu to find Kakashi, we better get started. Last night while Sakura was walking home, she met Sasuke and an unnamed female. They were apparently packed and leaving the village. What? Naruto couldn't believe hearing that. It's true, Sakura said, looking down at her hands. I found them. I asked what he was doing and he said he was leaving. He said that of this village held nothing for him anymore. He was leaving to gain more power and she was taking him away. I tried to shout out Buddha. Her hand went to the injury at her side. Although when she had been found, she had been taken to the hospital and healed. When she woke up and said what had happened, the Hokage had been informed immediately. That bastard, Naruto growled out. He didn't understand what he was thinking. Why would he just leave like that? Plus, who was this other girl? He looked at the image but he didn't know her. Then something hit him. Hey, could that be the same girl that Kakashi-sensei said might be the girlfriend Sasuke was supposed to have? Yeah, I think so, Sakura said in a more defeated tone. It was at that time that Kakashi walked into the room. He hadn't known what was going on, only that the Anbu had been looking for him. Which had been a problem as he hadn't been at his place. In fact, he was walking to his home to change as he was still wearing his clothing from last night. Not that anyone would really be able to tell. He and Anko had spent last night together. In fact, it seemed that the two of them were spending more time together and not just for sexual release. Sometimes they hung out just to hang out. But when the Anbu found him, he felt that something was up. Yo, Kakashi said, holding up a hand in greeting. Although he could feel some kind of tension in the room, he could nearly smell that something serious was up. Kakashi, where were you? Tsunade questioned. Anbu said that you weren't at your home. Kakashi knew that he could use one of his normal excuses, but those only worked when he was late. For something more serious he had to think of a more plausible lie. Despite what people thought, he could be very good at lying if he actually made an effort with it. And telling everyone here that he wasn't at his place because he spent the night at a female's home, one that his students were familiar with, wasn't the best thing to do. I couldn't sleep that well and decided to see if I could get in a little morning training before the day started. He explained, which if anyone looked at his clothing might notice it wasn't as neat as a new uniform should be. Tsunade nodded her head, accepting that as she informed him of what happened and Sakura told them the entire story of what happened again. Kakashi took a look at the image and something clicked. When Anko told him about the girl, she had given a brief description of the girl. You might want to have Anko take a look at this image to be sure, but she did say she saw Sasuke with a girl at his place. Kakashi then had to give a brief explanation as to why Anko had been over at his place. Tsunade nodded and told the Anbu to take the image and find Anko and have her verify it was the same girl. She also had Shizune pull up the list of any ninja that wasn't on missions and currently was in the village. If Sasuke was going to Orochimaru, then they had to hurry. The boy already had a lead of several hours. They couldn't let the last of the Uchiha fall into that man's hands, although what they did with him if they caught him was another story. This was a very serious crime and could end up making Sasuke be imprisoned for life. The only thing in his favor for not being executed was because of his age, rank, and this was his only offense. But despite all of that, abandoning a ninja village was one of the most serious crimes a ninja could do. Most rogue ninja that did so, they had hunter ninja after them for their entire life to be killed on sight by the special task force. Tsunade sighed. She was getting too old for this kind of stuff, and these children were too young to have one of their own betray them. Even Orochimaru had turned traitor until they were all adults. This was something she knew that would forever change their lives. The kids would take it the hardest. She glanced at Sakura and sighed. She couldn't fault the girl. Tsunade knew what it was like to be heartbroken. In fact, she had gone through it twice. She wasn't sure what was worse, when Dan died in her arms, or for Sakura to know that Sasuke was alive but might be a traitor. At least Tsunade had all those memories of Dan she cherished, but what would Sakura have? It would be hard, but she felt the girl would get over it and might even be stronger for it. Looking at Naruto, she could tell that a lot of emotions were going through that mind of his. He might take it just as hard, but for totally different reasons. Temari was looking at Naruto with a sense of sympathy. Well, that was a little strange for Tsunade, but she wouldn't pry too much into private affairs. Kakashi was masking himself, but she knew that for a teacher, he must be going through what the third had gone through with Orochimaru. Tsunade sighed. Some days she wished she could just stay in bed. Sasuke and Tayuya quickly made their way to the meeting point. They weren't too worried about leaving a trail, as they would have a pursuit team on them as soon as Konoha could mobilize one. So they moved through the night, only resting now and then to catch their breath and to check to make sure they weren't being followed. Soon after the sun rose was when they found themselves in a clearing in a forest. "This the place?" Sasuke asked, looking around the area. "Should be," Tayuya said, looking around. "That is if they're on fucking time." "Geez, you have no faith in us or what?" came a voice from the trees. Three boys roughly Tayuya's age, all wearing similar clothing of the Sound Village, came into view. "This is the rest of the team," Tayuya told Sasuke as she started to point them out to him. "The big fat one over there is Jirobo, the one with all the arms is Kitamaru, the last one is Sakin." Sakin stepped forward as he had been the leader of the group, at least until now when he got the new orders from Orochimaru. The tall boy had worn a string of beads around his neck, looking at the boy in front of him. He still couldn't believe that Orochimaru was making this boy the new leader of the team. It kind of burned him inside, but he wouldn't go against Orochimaru's orders no matter what they were. Still, was this guy supposed to replace Kimimaro? He didn't see it, but he would follow orders, even if he didn't like them. Going against Orochimaru wasn't healthy, and hardly anyone lived long enough to do it twice. "Did you bring it?" Tayuya asked impatiently. "Of course we brought it," he said defensively. "Good, then we can get started with bringing Sasuke's seal up to the next level while we go," Tayuya told him, seeing the interesting look in Sasuke's eyes. He had heard a bit of this, but Tayuya did have a bit of worry about this next step. The fact that the seal on them all killed 9 times out of 10, the odds were pretty much as bad for this next part. In fact, only a handful that had ever been through this made past this point. But she had a feeling that he might be able to do this. She didn't know why, but he wasn't as weak-willed as those in Konoha. It would take all his strong will in order to endure what was to come next. She knew exactly what he would face, and she wouldn't wish it on anyone. When you're alone there in the dark, it was a constant struggle, like you were constantly drowning in darkness. It felt like you were dying constantly, and at any moment if you slipped, just once, you would really die. She had seen what happened to those that they pulled out that didn't make it. They were dried up, their own bodies turned against them as the cursed seal seemed to make their own bodies eat themselves from the inside out. The Sound 4 brought out what they would need. It was a large wooden drum barrel with seal paper on it. This was a specially made device that Orochimaru used to help make the cursed seal grow in power. Sasuke looked at it, as Tayuya had explained in more detail on the trip here what was expected. He also knew the risks, but he would face them without fear. He hadn't come all this way to have his life end like this. He would pass this, gain more power and learn all he could from Orochimaru. Are you ready? Tayuya felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. She felt a bit of worry about what would happen to him, but she masked that. She wasn't sure why she was feeling like this. The boy was arrogant, cold, and yet they had shared a bed earlier. It had been pretty nice too, and she was wondering what had gotten into her. She never thought of boys before, so why was her mind seemed to be thinking about him lately? She didn't understand, but there was something about him that attracted her. Maybe it was the power he had or the potential of the power he could reach. Okay, sure, he was good looking, that she would admit to at least. Yes, I am, Sasuke said to her as he looked at her for a moment. He was unused to the feelings that he felt when he looked at her. All his life he felt mostly emptiness, hatred, anger and loss. But for some strange reason this foul-mouthed girl was different. She understood him. That was something that no one else could even come close to back in Konoha. She was a strong and capable female as well, unlike most other Konoha female ninja of about his age. Plus their night together was very interesting. There were obviously some possibilities with her. He watched as the lid was taken off, and he knew this would be a great challenge for him. Taking a moment for himself, he entered it and tried to get comfortable, not that it was easy in such a cramped place. The lid slowly started to close as he looked up to see Tayuya's brown eyes looking at him. She didn't look worried. In fact, he felt that she knew he would be able to do this. For whatever reason he smirked at her before the lid closed. It was then he was alone. There was oddly no light, no sound, no anything in here. It was like he had just entered into a void that he could just lose himself in. He snapped his mind back in focus. He had to stay focused. If he lost his concentration, he would never get out of this place. He wouldn't let this thing beat him. He had lived with the pain of the loss of his family, for being tortured for 3 days by his older brother twice. He wouldn't let this thing beat him. He still had goals to complete, to kill his brother and restore his clan. An image of Tayuya entered his mind, and he felt that maybe he was closer to one of those goals now. On the outside they strapped the container to Jirobo's back. Why do I have to be the damn pack mule? Because you fucking look like one, Tayuya snapped at him. You know I hate it when you curse all the time, the large boy said to her. What's with you anyway? You seem more on edge than normal. On edge? Don't you mean more bitchy than normal? Sakin laughed out. Fuck you and your brother. Tayuya flipped him off for good measure. She really didn't get along with them, but they were her team. Actually, they had been a team for a while now, and it was hard for them to get along with each other. Sure, in battle they would put aside any differences and kill their enemies like a well-oiled machine, but they all grated on each other in various ways. Can't believe the brat is to be our new leader, Sakin sighed in frustration as they started to move out. Wait, he's going to be made the leader of our team. Tayuya knew that Orochimaru wanted Sasuke for a new body. Although they had missed the window to get him to their master in time, it would take 3 years before Orochimaru was ready for a new body. She never really thought what he was going to do with him. The thought of working with him made her feel oddly pleased. So were the Sound 5 again. It is a bit nice to be back up to 5, Kidomaru commented. I felt like we leveled down since we lost our fifth. Technically he's not entirely lost, as you said, Sakin told the six-armed boy. Although Kabuto is the only thing keeping him alive, Tayuya, do you think this kid can really lead us? He doesn't look like much to me and you spent the most time with him. I think he'll fit in, Tayuya said, trying not to give open praise. The last thing she needed was for them to learn that there might be something between her and Sasuke. Not that she knew herself whatever it was they had. But sleeping together had changed things. He actually had smiled at her as her eyes cast a little look to the wooden container. She had never seen him smile at anything, and when he had smiled at her she felt a sensation she hadn't expected. Something warm inside, but she couldn't place a name for it. Anyways, we'll see how good he is, Sakin grunted. Kabuto said he would send reinforcements to help out. Not sure what he meant by that, but Lord Orochimaru is not taking chances this time around. Konoha. By the same massive gates of Konoha a retrieval team was set up. Given that many ninja were still out on missions and Konoha's forces were stretched thin, there weren't many that could go on this mission. Even the genin teams had been split up to make do with certain missions. That, and with the need of many jonins, many of them were out as well as chunins. Tsunade didn't like to send out so many young ones out. Sakura had wanted to go, but Tsunade forbade it. She was still not fully healed yet and this team would need speed. She knew the girl wanted to go and that was commendable, but as Hokage she had to make tough choices. But Sakura was going to see the team off at least. The young girl was adamant about that at least. Tsunade was looking over all those she could assemble for this team. She saw members of Team Guy, Tenten and Neji were there. Their sensei was on a mission and Lee was still under medical care. The young boy was still recovering from his surgery. It was amazing she had pulled it off. To tell the truth, it had been touch and go several times, but somehow she managed to save the young boy's ninja career. Some part of her wished she hadn't, knowing that the young boy might one day die in duty instead of living as a civilian. But she knew that Lee would most likely rather die than not be a ninja. As she understood things, Lee wasn't too pleased with not being on this mission. But he wouldn't be ready for missions until at least 2 more weeks. Hinata and Kiba were also here. Both were great trackers which would be essential for this mission, like with Neji. Shino was already out of the village at the moment with their sensei, as only 2 were needed for the mission they were on. Kakashi was here with Naruto and Temari, of course, as they had to go as they knew Sasuke the most. Maybe that was a downside too given how close they were, but Tsunade needed able-bodied people for this. If the last Uchiha went rogue it would be a great political embarrassment they couldn't afford. Plus he was one of their most promising genin. If Orochimaru got his hands on him there was no telling what kind of weapon he would turn Sasuke into. There was one last addition to the force, and that had been with Anko. The special jonin had been sought out to confirm that the girl described by Sakura was the same Anko had seen. It turns out not only had it been the same girl, but an Anbu had also knew the image as one of those that Orochimaru had used on his attack on the third Hokage. It was this reason that Tsunade had placed the woman on the team. In fact, when Anko had learned of Orochimaru's involvement, the young woman had demanded to go on the mission. She didn't need 2 missing nin on her hands, plus her skills would be valuable. Plus if Sasuke Uchiha needed to be taken out, Anko would do it without hesitation. Tsunade just hoped it would never come to that. Even if the Uchiha had made a mistake, he was still young and could change, and no matter what, ordering the death of a child just didn't sit well with her. It was times like this she really hated being Hokage, being the one to make orders like this. It was no wonder she drank herself to sleep at times. She wanted to be a healer, to save lives. Yes, she would fight and kill for her village, but ordering others to do it had never been something she could ever get used to doing. The entire team was now gathered around one of the massive gates that Sakura had seen Sasuke heading towards, so they had a good idea of his trail. Kiba was watching Akamaru sniff the ground for Sasuke's scent. It had been good weather, and any scent the young pup might be able to get would help in making sure they were on the right path. Naruto and Temari were gathered around with the others of their generation. "I can't believe that Sasuke would let that bitch attack you and then just run off," Tenten said to Sakura, hearing the full story. "How could he do something like that?" I don't know," Sakura told the older girl. "He said this village had nothing left for him anymore." "Damn it," Naruto said angrily. First he had made Sakura sad and now this. Sure, he loved Temari now, but Sakura would always be his first crush and special to him. Plus as a friend and teammate he couldn't let this kind of thing slide. Don't worry Sakura-chan, we'll get him back even if I have to kick his ass and drag him back here. You might want to be prepared for the worst, Neji warned him. After all, he's joining one of our most hated and dangerous enemies, willingly apparently as well. Even if you bring him back he'll have to face judgment for his crimes. Not only acting against a fellow ninja, consorting with the enemy and actions that can be viewed as being a traitor and defection will not be a light sentence on him. Naruto and Sakura looked at the Hyuga as Sakura had to voice her concern. What could happen to him? Execution for starters, Anko said, overhearing this, and walked over in an uncharacteristic serious fashion. Desertion or defection alone is punishable by death. Although given he's the last Uchiha we have, they might just lock him up for the rest of his life. A few might want to breed him for the Sharingan, but others might feel that it's just not worth the effort. Given that Itachi killed his clan and still at large and now Sasuke, they might think insanity runs in the family and not take that chance. I won't let them do that, Naruto said to the purple-haired woman. I'm not bringing him back just for some stupid people to kill him. Then be prepared to be a friend to him and kill him on the battlefield, Anko told him. It might be better that way than being executed or living in a cage his entire life. What? How can you say that? Naruto demanded and felt a hand on his shoulder. He looked to see Temari looking at him with an expression he couldn't really read on her face. Naruto, sometimes you can't save them, no matter how much you want to save them and have things go back to the way they were. Temari paused, remembering their last mission. Take it from me, I've been where you were and you know what I mean. Naruto did know now what she was talking about. He had been there and seen her fight her old friend and then kill her. Temari had taken it pretty hard, and here he was in the exact same position she had been in. He was very quiet as this sunk in. Would he have to kill Sasuke, or maybe he should ask, could he even kill the other boy? He honestly didn't think he could. Despite everything, Naruto still considered him his friend and rival. He had to at least try and get him back, if only to save him from himself. He wasn't sure what Sasuke was thinking, but he was at least going to force some answers out of him. Naruto, Sakura spoke up as the young blonde looked up at her. Just do your best. I don't know what is going on, but if you can't bring him back, she paused, knowing the kinds of things Naruto did. In all honesty, these words were killing her on the inside, but she was so unsure now. Sasuke had left. She confessed her love and he did nothing as Tayuya beat her down. Did she and the village mean so little to him that he would do all of this? Just be careful, Sakura told him. She didn't want to lose anyone else today. Naruto was at a loss. He would think that if anyone wanted Sasuke back more than him, it would be Sakura. He felt totally uncertain now. Was he the only one that wanted him back? Even if they did bring him back, Anko's words haunted him. All right, let's get this started, Kakashi said, not wanting to waste any more time. The more time they took to get moving meant the more time it would give them to get away. They had to capture Sasuke before he left the country. They could in theory continue pursuit, but that ran risks. If they entered into another country with a shinobi force, then they would be forced to deal with that group, making it harder to capture Sasuke. Also, it could also lead into a diplomatic incident to have a group this large enter into another country. That was why only 4-man cells went in at a time. It prevented the idea that another country was invading. It was an unspoken rule between the shinobi nations. That's why you found that number of people in a cell. But the worst that could happen is if they entered the territory of the Sound Village. They would have already be at war with them if they could, but they were too busy keeping the village afloat and repairing the damage of the failed invasion. It would be certain that if they entered enemy territory, it would be impossible to get out without a lot of losses. Sound would be on the lookout for them in case they gave chase, so they had to hurry and catch them before they left the country. Kiba, I want you up front, Kakashi said to the boy whose nose was just a bit better than Kakashi's own. Hinata, Neji, you two will be on the left and right of him. You two will watch the sides for attack. I'll be up front as well. Tenten, Naruto and Temari will be the center, and Anko, I need you protecting our rear. Anko nodded, seeing the plan he was making. It was a pretty good formation. Kiba could track and warn of anything up ahead. The two Hyuga would be able to see if someone was about to attack anywhere, especially on the sides. Kakashi up front meant they had the leadership and firepower of a Jonin if they needed to assault an enemy head-on. The others would make up the grunt work of the core while she was to guard them from a rear attack and give orders if the front got separated from the rest of them. It was a nice setup, although she was wondering about those sound ninja. They seemed to be more elites despite their young age, of Orochimaru. That meant they could expect some nasty surprises and she wanted to be ready for them. The team headed out at a dead run. They had a lot of ground to cover and they couldn't let the enemy get too far ahead. Sakura watched them leave, wanting to go with them. She hated feeling weak and being left behind. She didn't want to be the one to be left behind anymore. She wanted to be the one that went out there to help the team and be useful. But only one day of training didn't mean she was ready. She felt a strong yet soft hand lightly land on her shoulder. She looked up to see the Hokage also looking at the team vanishing off in the horizon. "I know you want to go out there," Tsunade said softly. "I hated it when I got left behind. As a medic in the war, one sometimes had to run the area for the field hospital while my teammates went out there. I always hated it because I never knew what was going to happen. Now as Hokage I'm sending out people all the time on dangerous missions but can't go with them to make sure they make it back." Sakura looked on as she felt she was seeing a side of the Hokage that many never had seen before. Instead of a powerful ninja that ran the village, she could see the woman that was behind all of that. Tsunade smiled down at the young girl, knowing how she was feeling. "Come on, Shizune is putting together a medical team to follow the pursuit team and I'm without an assistant." Tsunade turned to walk towards the Hokage tower. "Tsunade-sama," Sakura asked, blinking a couple of times. "Well, since you have nothing to do I need your help. Besides I can teach you a few things during the breaks." Tsunade walked on, hearing the young girl starting to walk behind her. She smiled at that. She knew that she would need someone to help with the office work. But there was more to it than that. Sakura would need the work to keep her mind off what was going on. And Tsunade could use the same treatment with work to keep her mind off this as well. Having someone around the office would do her good, and she could use someone around, or else she would start climbing the walls. Sound Team. The Sound Ninja were making their way north towards the Land of Sound, formerly the Land of Rice Fields. If they could get there, they knew they were home free. There was no way that the Leaf would be able to find them, not with all the Sound Ninja there and bases scattered all over the land. Unlike other ninja villages, Sound didn't have a single village but multiple ones scattered all over the place. You find one but would never find them all. But with the extra weight that Jirobo was having to carry, their speed was reduced. Besides that, Jirobo was the slowest member of the team. His speed was further slowed down carrying Sasuke. They also had to be careful. If container fell and broke open, or if Sasuke was pulled out prematurely, well, they weren't sure what would happen. Only that Orochimaru told them to never have that happen. Odds were best that it would kill Sasuke if he didn't complete his personal trail in there. This wasn't good, as this would give time for any pursuit team to catch up to them. "Where the hell are we going?" Chiyuya asked, hoping for some kind of plan. "We're going to head the quickest say home," Sakin told her as they continued to go on. "We'll pass a field and we're going straight through the Valley of the End." "Valley of the what?" Jirobo asked. He never really was one for history. He was a fighter, not a historian, and honestly he wasn't from Fire originally, so why should he care about the history of others if he didn't care about history in general? "It's this place where some big battle happened between an Uchiha and one of the Hokages. I forget which one, but it's some kind of big deal. There are supposed to be these two large statues placed there." "What's the fucking point of that?" Chiyuya knew the Leaf were strange, but putting statues in the middle of nowhere. Does anyone actually go there, or anything? Anything in the area like a small settlement we should worry about? "No, it's just two really big statues that were placed there. Maybe people visit now and then, but the area is pretty much uninhabited." Chiyuya said nothing for a bit as she thought about that. "That's crazy. Why go through all the trouble? I mean, just how big are the statues anyway?" "I heard they were as tall as the waterfall in the area," Kitamura stated, actually having heard of this. "But you're right, it's kind of a waste to make something like that, isn't it?" "Damn Leaf Ninja," Jirobo grunted. "They're all idiots if you ask me. Hell, they couldn't even protect their own Hokage properly, and I bet those guys that failed to protect him weren't even executed. You can be sure that if we messed up that badly we wouldn't live long after it. Kitamura laughed in grim humor. Yeah, how is that for job motivation? Anyways, Sakin said, getting back to the matter at hand. We're going this route because it's on the border. We can cross it quickly and easier if we go through there. So let's just try and pick up the pace a bit. They were going for an hour before they needed to take a break to rest up for the next leg of the trip. They looked at the sun to gauge how much time had passed and mentally calculated how much travel they had roughly taken. It didn't look good, not with how slow things had gotten now. If they didn't need to get Sasuke ready, they would have made twice the distance, and everyone knew it. Damn, it's only a matter of time before they catch up, Tayuya angrily said, looking to the south, knowing they could get overrun within the next hour, too, if the Leaf were slow to respond. We're going to need someone to slow them down, Sakin stated, taking the situation into account. Jirobo, I want you to slow them down. Fine with me, the large boy said as he stretched out. I was getting tired of carrying that thing anyway. So am I to take them down or just delay them? I say take as many as you can down, Kitamura grinned. That will slow them down. They wouldn't leave behind their comrades if they were wounded. You know how weak they are in that regard. But if you can take them all down, then go for it and catch up. Then it's decided then, said Sakin. So who carries the damn box? Kitamura asked, and then looked as everyone was looking at him. Me and my big mouth. Hey, how about a game of rock, paper, scissors? Fuck no, you cheat at that all the time, Tayuya said to him. Now carry that thing already. As the sound team split up, Jirobo stayed behind and got ready. He wasn't sure what would come their way, but if they were following their trail they would come right to this area. He got up in the trees and got ready to deal with whatever the Leaf would send. Even if he died he didn't care. If he failed he was a dead man anyway, as failure was not tolerated in the Sound Village. They were a small village, so they couldn't afford to lose, and neither could he. He would either complete his mission and survive or die, and it was better to die in battle than whatever Orochimaru would do. There were worse fates than death. The sound team that had been used for sacrifices to being back the dead Hokages was proof of that. He grinned as he remembered Kitamaru's words. Job motivation indeed. Temari looked over at Naruto as they made their way through the forest they were currently in. Kiba had a scent and was leading the team as they were pushing themselves to catch up. Naruto had been very silent, and she knew why. He was in a personal turmoil about this whole thing. Naruto was an extremely loyal person, and he always hoped for the best. It was a trait that you could admire, but also was a major weakness at times too. She was worried that he wouldn't fight to his fullest if they had to fight Sasuke. She was worried that Sasuke wouldn't hold back. In fact, she had a feeling the boy might not. She wanted to give him some advice or say something that would make him more at ease, but there was nothing she could say. The only thing she could say, she had told him already. She knew exactly what he was going through, and she didn't want Naruto to go through what she went through with Kimi. It still stung to think of the other girl. She could still see both her smiling face so full of life and the headless corpse that the girl ended up as. There were nights she still woke up in a cold sweat from it. The only comfort she found was curling up to Naruto's warm body and letting him take away the pain and sorrow she felt in those moments in the dark. She didn't want to see him in pain. She knew the kind of life he had lived through her brother Gaara's life. She knew the kind of pain he kept locked away so others wouldn't see it. If Sasuke ended up dead, she knew he would blame himself for this entire thing. Even if it wasn't his fault, he took it upon himself to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders for some strange reason. It was one of the things she did like about him. But deep down, she had a feeling that this would not end well. No matter what happened, she knew that this day would change a lot of things. She wasn't sure why she felt it or what would change, but she just knew deep down that this day would shape things to come. She looked at her husband and she felt that this would be a day he would remember for the rest of his life as well. Well, whatever happened, she would be there for him. Naruto barely could focus on where he was going. His body moved on its own like he knew exactly what to do while his mind was occupied. He was trying to make sense of the entire thing. He couldn't understand Sasuke. He tried to understand him for years, but he never seemed to get anywhere. Sasuke was the first person to look at him and not look through him. Sure, it was a look that said, "I'm better than you," but to Naruto he took that as a challenge. He never told anyone this, but it was trying to prove himself to Sasuke that made him train so hard. When no one was there for him, he pushed himself because he had a goal to reach. It took years, but he felt that he finally reached it, and Sasuke saw him as someone that was his equal. Plus there had been fun times with the team when he had actually smiled or seemed like he had a good time even though he wouldn't admit it. Where had that Sasuke gone? He didn't know, but whatever was going on, he was going to have some words with Sasuke. They continued on until Kakashi called for a halt. They all stopped in the branches of the trees as Naruto saw a small clearing. There were 4 people, one of them a girl with long red hair like in the sketch he had seen in the Hokage's office. They were sitting around a large wooden barrel doing something with it. Naruto looked at Kakashi, who seemed to be looking calmly at the place. Why wasn't he ordering them to attack? They were right there out in the open, they should surprise them while they could. Kakashi on the other hand could feel that this was all wrong. Years of experience told him to not just jump in. He looked around. He couldn't see much in the way of traps, but them sitting there totally exposed was a rookie mistake. And these were supposed to be Orochimaru's personal unit of some kind. He really doubted that this group would make such a mistake. This was obviously a trap of some sort, but what kind? Well, he had a few guesses, but nothing he knew for sure. He cast a look to Anko, and as they shared a look he could tell she was thinking the same thing. Maybe he could get Anko to lead a group from behind. The others would wait here while he went down to trip the trap. If anyone would get out of it, it would be him, and it wouldn't be the first time. Those 2 ninja they ran into on the way to Wave was an example. He couldn't remember their names though. Something overly grandiose and something they didn't deserve to be called, he figured. He was about to give Anko the plan when an orange blur jumped into the clearing. "Give back Sasuke, you bastards!" Naruto yelled out. Kakashi blinked for a second before sighing. "I really should have seen that coming," he said to himself. "All right, go after him before something happens." Naruto landed in the middle of the group, fully intent to beat them into submission for some answers. "All right, you jerks, where the hell is Sasuke? You better tell me where he is and what you've done, or else." He glared at them, but they barely did anything to his appearance. If there was one thing he hated, it was being ignored. The other landed around him, all ready to fight as well. "Naruto," Kakashi sighed to his student, keeping an eye on things. "You really need to learn some patience." "I'll be sure to remind him of that later," Temari said unhappily. It was one of the hardest things she tried to teach Naruto. It just seemed like he forgot his self-preservation instincts at times like these. Honestly, if he kept this up, she would have gray hair by the time she was 30. They were about to move, then the Sound 4 suddenly turned to smoke and explosive tags were left. Kakashi yelled out a warning as everyone tried to dodge the explosions. Those weren't the only ones either, as explosive tags were placed in strategic places. The explosions were near deafening, and the shockwaves of the explosions could be felt right to their bones, but they didn't fall. When there was a break, Kakashi noticed that no one had been harmed, but also that they were in one spot. He knew that they had just been manipulated into being in this area and was about to yell out to scatter when another voice was heard. "Earth-style barrier. Earth Dome prison," the real member of the Sound 4 said as a large rock dome suddenly engulfed them all. It was pretty dark in the rock dome, which made sense of course, but it wasn't very big, and with everyone inside there wasn't much room. They could walk around and stuff, but the place was totally enclosed. "What the hell is this?" Naruto asked, looking around. "It's called a trap," Kiba told him. Naruto glared at him. "I know that much. I meant, what kind of jutsu is this?" "It's not one I recognize," Anko stated, looking at Kakashi. For the man that was supposed to have taken in 1,000 different jutsu, he would have a better idea than most at what this might be. When he just shrugged, she slumped a bit. Talk about a bit of a letdown. "Well, let's at least try to see what kind of jutsu this is then," Kakashi said, starting his hand seals. Suddenly there was a bright light as the sound of many birds chirping was heard as he created his Chidori. Kakashi slammed it into the rock wall as everyone watched. A large gouge was created. Everyone also watched as the damage slowly started to heal up. "Well, this is a new one for me." Kakashi had never seen this kind of jutsu before. He kind of wished he had his Sharingan uncovered. It might have been a good one to add to his arsenal for a future date. Anko looked closely at it, running a hand over where the damage had been. Not even a scratch left. How about we all try different areas? Kakashi shrugged. Couldn't hurt to see if there was a limit to it all. I can't use any of my techniques in this place, it would just backfire on all of us, Temari said, clearly not happy about it. All her wind jutsus were mid to long range, she didn't have anything that could be used here. Her new personal fans might, but there was still the risk of the wind being used in this enclosed space. She would need to mold the air, and if the place was airtight, well, that ran some risks. I think I'm the same. Tenten was just as unhappy about this. She was excited to be on such a mission, but she was a range type. Plus all her really majorly powerful weapons needed room to swing, and she didn't have it with so many people packed into here. I think Akamaru and myself have something that can work. Everyone stand back. Hiba asked as everyone did so. Hiba and Akamaru went spinning into the enclosed area as they both smashed the walls all over the place. They left damage all over it, but it slowly healed itself again. Kakashi asked the two Hyuga to see what was going on, hoping that the Byakugan what they reported wasn't something Kakashi liked. Apparently the stone dome was covered in chakra, and not only was it being directed, it was also attacking them. Kakashi thought he felt a drain. He noticed it as it felt like when he used his Sharingan, but slightly different. It was more subtle drain. Clearly this jutsu was designed to not only capture but let its prey exert themselves, using up more chakra as they were drained. He had to admit, this was a good move, but he also knew that every technique had flaws in them. Naruto was looking around them as something came to his mind. He was being trained to cut rock with his chakra. Well, would that work on this? Sure, it was a lot bigger, but Temari was good at it. Maybe she could try something. Hey Temari-chan. Yes. How about that wind training exercise? Can't you do that here? Temari thought about it and shook her head. I'm good at that, Naruto, but I don't have the chakra to get all of this. You'd need a massive amount. Well, why can't I help you? Naruto asked her as everyone looked at him. Remember in the forest when I helped you with your fan? Temari's eyes widened as she remembered that. How could she had forgotten that? With her control and his chakra they could do it. All that wind chakra would cut this place to shreds. There was no way this guy would be able to heal from all that extensive damage in time. It might work. Temari explained what happened with Naruto in their last mission to those that hadn't been there. Even if you can't break it all, it would weaken it enough for us to smash through, Anko said, impressed by this idea. She could see why Kakashi often said that Naruto came up with surprising ideas. At any rate, this guy is delaying us, and you can bet the more time we waste here the further the others are getting away, I bet. So someone will have to stay behind and fight while the others go on. Kakashi surmised what she was getting at. Yep, Anko grinned. Well, I might as well do it. I can take him out and catch up the most easily out of everyone here, as Kakashi has to lead the team. Kakashi thought of asking if she was sure, but knew that she might take his head off for even insinuating she might not be able to do this. Plus she had a point. Besides himself, she was the most experienced one here, and she had been trained by Orochimaru like the others might have been. He looked to Naruto and Temari and told them to try it. Naruto, given that he would put all his chakra into this, placed his hands onto the cold stones. Temari came up behind him as she laid her own hands over his. Both closed their eyes as they started with a breathing exercise to help get into sync with the other. They hadn't trained for something like this, but if it worked before, it might work again. Naruto tried to slowly put his chakra out. It was hard for him to tell as he had so much. He had never had an accurate account of how much chakra he put into techniques at first. He did his best, knowing that the more he put out would be harder on Temari, so he just focused on slowly leaking it out. He felt her hands warm as she tried to mold it just right along with him. Temari could start to feel Naruto's chakra. Once again, it was shocking to feel this much come out of someone. It was like there was a whole lake of chakra behind Naruto. She tried to focus on the chakra. It felt like trying to control a stream of fast-moving water. She took a breath to calm herself as she felt her hands on his. She let go of everything else, where they were, the trouble they were in, everything except for this moment. This moment was the only thing that existed as she concentrated, and slowly she felt the chakra change. Jirobo had been pressing against the rock wall since the technique started. He had to do, else the entire thing would collapse. He could feel the chakra draining out of the team. It would take some time with them, but time was on his side, and the longer this took the further the others could get away. He was still surprised the loud blonde one had just jumped right into the ambush. He had set up a few other tricks to get them into it, but it turned out he had overplanned. Oh well, good for him at least. He felt them trying to get out but just smirked. They had no chance against this technique of his. The only weakness was that he was defenseless in this position, but it wasn't like there wasn't anyone else to worry about, so he was perfectly safe. Then he felt something else. Chakra was being put into the rocks for some reason. Well, whatever, he would just take that as well, and he did start to. But the power just seemed to slowly increase and tried to encompass the entire dome. He wouldn't allow that and tried to drain more of it. But the more he drained, the more that seemed to be show up. He could only absorb so much at any one time, and the dome wasn't being damaged yet, so he couldn't bleed it off to help fix anything. He felt like he was in a tug of war and was slowly losing. Then suddenly the chakra changed. It was this unrefined powerhouse and suddenly turned into this sharp feeling, like tiny razor blades were pressed up against his palms. And like a sudden hurricane wind it happened. The chakra suddenly seemed to attack all over the dome. He pulled back his hands in a surprised cry of pain and anger. He looked at his palms to see many small cuts on them. What the hell was that? Jirobo asked himself and realized he needed to get to the rock wall again before they tried to break out. But it was too late for that, as the rock dome was suddenly smashed outward as everyone jumped out of it. Jirobo couldn't believe that they had found a way to get out of his jutsu. How had they done it? What was that chakra he felt when his hands had been cut like that? All right, everyone go, Anko said to everyone, looking at the large boy in front of her. She grinned at him as she took out a kunai. I'll deal with the fat boy, here you go and catch up. Don't try to take too long, Kakashi said, but smiled to her. I know you like to play with your prey, but we're on the clock. Anko sighed in annoyance. Yeah, just go and I'll catch up as soon as I can. She gave them a shooing motion with her free hand, not taking her eyes of the enemy in front of her. Even if the boy was young, she wouldn't take him lightly. The others went off, leaving the special Jonin alone with the other boy. Jirobo had considered doing something to slow them down, but the woman in front of her seemed to think that she could take him. He didn't know who she was exactly, but she carried herself with someone with at least some experience. Plus he couldn't really fend off the entire group for long. At the very least he could take care of her and then attack the others from behind. Plus his team would most likely send someone to slow down the Konoha ninja anyway. You have some guts taking me on all alone, Jirobo told her. Anko just shrugged. I was getting bored and it wouldn't take much for me to deal with a kid like yourself. Jirobo narrowed his eyes. I may be younger than you or Granny, but that doesn't mean I'm soft. A vein throbbed in Anko's head at what he had called her. Granny. She wasn't even in her mid-20s yet, and this little fat prick of a ninja dared to call her Granny. Oh, she was so going to make this boy pay in blood for that one. She threw her kunai out towards him as she ran forward, reaching into her pockets. One of the reasons she loved her coat was that she could put all kinds of fun things in it. There were hidden pockets all over the place, some even sealed up on the inside, letting her carry far more items than normally she could. She knew he would dodge, but threw out small orbs at him. He didn't have enough time to dodge as the smoke bombs blew up, making large clouds of dark smoke. She jumped high and in a sailing arc over him threw out a large number of shurikens. These she wasn't really aiming for him, just the general area, as they had metal wires on them. Holding the wires in her hand, she quickly placed the ends in her mouth as she quickly went through the hand seals. She used the fire dragon technique, a move that was similar to the usual fireball, only this traveled along the wires, making it look like a dragon in appearance. As she finished, she took a breath, molding the chakra in her lungs, feeling the heat building up as she spit out the fire. The roaring flames came out quickly as they went into the smoke. She dropped the wires as soon as the jutsu was finished. No sense in burning her lips on hot wires, as her mouth wouldn't be protected by chakra after the technique was finished. When the smoke cleared, she was a bit surprised to see a large rock-formed box. Huh, nice block, but not exactly good for moving around, Anko said, not sure if he could hear in there and not really caring. She pulled out another kunai with one hand and an explosive tag with the other. She wrapped up the tab onto the handle and threw it towards the rock. She brought up the arm of her coat to protect her eyes as the weapon exploded. If he was in there he wouldn't be happy. He might have survived the explosion, but the concussive force would play hell on the body. She scanned the large hole, but there was nothing inside of it. There was no way he could have made a substitution in that kind of condition. You needed a clear line of sight mostly for that, plus there was no log or anything inside of it. Wait, there was something hidden at the bottom. It was slightly covered by destroyed rocks, but as got closer she saw a large hole in the ground, one she hadn't made. Her eyes widened as she then tried to quickly get away, knowing what he had done, but it was too late. Jirobo burst out of the ground behind her as his large arms wrapped around her chest. Her arms were pinned to her sides as the boy started to try and crush her with his massive arms. She had to admit he was strong for his age. For an old hag like yourself that wasn't too bad of a combo, Jirobo said to her as he tried to crush her body. Too bad for you, I'm smarter than that. TCH, you think you won simply because of this? Don't make me laugh, fat boy, Enko told him, trying to see what she could do. Well then let me show you something else then. Jirobo wanted to punish this woman and he was going to break her in half to do it. He called on the powers of the cursed seal as the power started to flow through him as the black markings started to show up over his body. Enko looked at the arms as she saw the markings. She winced for a bit as a pain hit her neck. Her own seal was acting up in response to this, but thankfully Kakashi's new seal over it was working. When she fought her old teacher she hadn't been able to move. Now it was more like a pin in her neck. She could deal with that. This is the power of Orochimaru and the sound, Jirobo stated as with the new power he started to crush the woman. Enko gritted her teeth as she tried to keep her breath. She couldn't cry out as the boy was squeezing her like an anaconda now. If she cried out there was no way she would be able to get that air back. She felt the pressure increase as the pain started to increase. She felt him flex his arms tightly and she couldn't help but grunt in pain. Her arms were digging into her sides now and she felt like a tube of toothpaste at the moment. Suddenly one of her ribs made a cracking sounds as she bit her lip from crying out in pain. That one was broken, she was sure of it. Another bad sound as another rib was fractured or broken. She had to do something quickly. She would die from suffocating or he would break her rib cage, leaving her to a slow death from internal injuries or incapacitated to finish her off. She looked at her right wrist and put all her concentration into the seal under it. This wasn't a weapon seal but a summoning seal. This seal would allow her to summon a certain type of snake without blood, but it wasn't one of her lethal snakes, but he should be good enough. She concentrated, pouring her chakra into it, and felt the summon animal arrive. Jirobo didn't know what happened until he felt the sharp stings hit his arm. He grunted as he felt something touching his arm. He shifted her a bit to get a look and imagine his surprise when he saw a snake biting into his arm. He released the woman immediately as he pulled back and tried to grab the snake. It let itself go as it fell to the ground. He started at the animal as it stared at him. The snake flicked its tongue at him before vanishing into a puff of smoke. At first he thought it had been some kind of tamed snake, but that had been a summoned snake. That didn't make any sense to him. The only one with a contract with the snakes should have been his master. That couldn't have been the part of the same animal summons, could it? He glared at the woman who was now getting up, although she was using an arm to hold onto her injured rib area. Who the hell are you? How did you summon one of the snakes? He demanded. Enko grinned at him. You really don't know. Well then let me educate you. I am Enko Mitarashi, special Jonin of the Hidden Leaf and the first student of Orochimaru. She pulled down her collar to show him the curse mark with Kakashi's seal around it. Take a good look. See anything familiar? Jirobo couldn't believe this. He hadn't known that their master had a pupil at some stage. Of course he and the others knew he had been with the Leaf Village originally, but they had never dared ask about his past there. So how could they have known he had had a student, let alone one that had a cursed seal marking? But there was something odd about this. The women had something around the seal. Was it some kind of counter seal? If so, then he had nothing to worry about now. He relaxed a bit. If she had a full seal she might have been able to use it. If she had been able to go to the second stage then he really would have been worried, but this woman seemed to try and get rid of the power. Foolish of her, he thought, and it would cost her. If you could use that seal then I would be in trouble, but apparently you actually don't want to use it. Jirobo sneered at her. I have my own reasons, Anko stated as she didn't want to get into that. She didn't use the seal because she didn't want to use it because it was something that Orochimaru had done to her. She didn't know what it was for, but looking at the sound ninja in front of her she now had a good idea. She had never once tried to explore its abilities, mainly because of the pain it caused, but she could just never bring herself to do it. She felt tainted with the mark on her, and looking at the ninja in front of her just confirmed her reasons to not ever using it. This was something that looked and felt totally unnatural. Anyways, I'm not one for long talks with my enemies since this fight is nearly over anyway. You should be feeling it pretty soon. Feeling it? Feeling what exactly? Jirobo swayed a bit as he felt his vision swim slightly. He looked at the wound of his arm and understood. That little guy wasn't a lethal snake, mind you, Anko told him. This little one I call up in case I need a person alive. His toxin is special, it attacks the nerves and motor functions. Soon you won't be able to move at all. Jirobo cursed under his breath. This woman was more than she appeared, and he had let himself get too confident. He would have to end this as fast as he could, and that meant using his full power. With that decision he called on his seal to release his full power. He felt the power flowing into his body. It was like his blood was on fire when he used this power. But it was oh so lovely as well, intoxicating at the same time as his body was forced through the changes. Soon his body went through another change. His skin slowly started to turn darker with several large warts on the forehead and shoulders. His hair grew out into a long mane as his eyes took on a black and gold look to them. Anko stood there in shock at this. She never knew the seal was able to do something like this. Damn it, now he's most likely even more dangerous. Just great. What the hell is that snake bastard doing these days? I really hope mine never does that. That's just what I need, to turn into some kind of freaky looking monster. Damn, my ribs hurt like hell too. Looks like I won't be able to catch up with Kakashi just yet. I just know I'll hear about me being injured by some fat kid later on from him. She mentally scowled at that. Jirobo charged at her with speed that surpassed what he had before. She threw herself to the side hoping to dodge it. His fist hit her shoulder and sent her flying. She hit the ground and her body skipped several times before a tree stopped her. She cried out in pain as she felt that her arm had been dislocated from that shot. His strength was something she had never faced before. He might not be on Tsunade's level, but he was getting damn close. She forced herself to get up. Letting him get close was way out of the question, and with her arm like this she couldn't use hand seals. She would have to wait him out and hope that this form wouldn't nullify the toxin in his body. She got up on her legs, even if they were a little shaky, but she willed her body to move. She jumped out of the way as the large boy slammed a fist into the tree where she had been against. The tree snapped in half from his punch. She reached into her pockets and decided to play a bit dirty now. She threw 2 more small smoke bombs which he just charged through them. The sound ninja looked around to see her in a tree branch now. You think that will save you? If you do, then you really are an idiot. He went through several hand seals as large rocks erupted out of the earth around Anko's area. Some of them were taller than trees as some smashed through the forest floor. Anko had to jump to avoid the same fate as her branch as it was shattered. If one of those had hit her legs she wouldn't be walking. She threw one of the other small smoke bombs again, and Jirobo was getting very fed up with this. He could feel his body slowing down and he was feeling tired despite using the second stage. He would just charge through the smoke, not letting it to slow him down anymore. He rushed through the smoke and this time he would finish her off. But as soon as he hit the smoke cloud he screamed in pain as his hands went to his eyes, not only that he felt like sandpaper was being rubbed over his skin. That wasn't a smoke bomb exactly, Anko said smirking as she sat on another branch. That also held a bunch of crushed glass. You bitch, Jirobo roared as his eyes hurt like hell. It was like someone was sticking thousands of needles into his eyes. He was blinded now and he couldn't do anything about it. Been called worse, Anko muttered to herself as he got her weapons ready. She watched at the boy flail aloud blindly. She got several kunai with the highest explosive tags that she had on her put onto the handles. She took careful aim as she threw them around the sound ninja. They soon exploded, making a large explosion. Anko was blinded by it, and for a moment she thought that she might have went a little overboard with how much explosive power she had used. She landed on the ground as the dust started to settle. She was amazed that the ninja's body was intact. Although he was laying on the ground not moving, and slowly his body started to turn back to normal. Even if the slight damage on his body told her that he suffered damage on the outside, the force of that explosion would have messed up his internal organs. Taking a good look showed her that he wasn't breathing. "I hate it when it's kids," she commented to herself as she went to the nearest tree. She gritted her teeth knowing that she shouldn't do what she was going to do, but she needed to fix her shoulder. She slammed her shoulder into the tree, popping her shoulder back in. She cried out in pain as she slumped against the tree. "Damn, I think I should train more if he's making brats like that in sound." Anko sighed as she took a moment to rest before she forced herself up to follow the others. Kakashi led the others on as they left Anko behind, although he knew she was fully capable ninja and he respected her and her skills. It didn't sit well with him leaving someone behind. Images of what happened with Rin all those years ago. He tried to leave her behind and Obito had to make him see what was really important. That mission hadn't ended well. Yes, he had gotten Rin out, but Obito paid with his life. It was something that still haunted him to this day, and to his dying breath, most likely, as the eye in his head was an ever-constant reminder of that day. Now leaving her behind felt like that day all over again for him. This was why he preferred to work alone when he was in Anbu. It made him worry less about those under his care. At any rate, his worry for her was something he had to push back into his mind. He had to focus on the mission and only the mission. He caught something in his vision as he jumped and held up a fist. The others stopped as he bent down slightly. "What is it?" Temari asked him. "There seems to be some kind of wire on the ground." Kakashi could just barely see it. Whatever it was unlike anything he had seen. It was so fine that only the light reflecting off it gave him his only warning. He was thankful that his original eye was really good. Sure, it was no Sharingan, but he could see better than most with it. He looked again and noticed another wire next to it. He had to admit, a double tripwire trap was a neat trick. You think you missed it by bypassing the first one and then have a second even thinner one after it. He remembered someone that once would make a hidden trap and then place an even harder one to see right after it while on a mission years ago. "All right everyone, follow me," Kakashi said to them all. "Step where I step and not anywhere else. We have tripwires and I don't know if they are linked to traps or a warning system. It might be to slow us down, but we have to be careful." The team cautiously but quickly made their way forward. Kakashi took great pains to avoid the wires when he saw them. They were on the grounds, between trees and even in the branches. He was amazed at how many there were. Either there were more opposition than he thought, or this might have been set up in advance. Either one didn't sit well with him. More enemies would complicate things, and many traps set up in advance while they had waited for Sasuke would mean they had time to set up any kind of trap. As they moved on, they eventually came to a small clearing. Kakashi looked around but didn't see anything out of the ordinary. So they moved forward. It was only when he heard the rustle of the leaves that he shouted for everyone to take cover. They all managed to dodge a literal hail of kunai from the trees. There had to be a lot of people hidden there to throw that many, but he couldn't see any of them. More and more of the deadly little knives rained down on them. "Where the hell are they coming from?" Kiba shouted out, trying to get to the trees for cover. But every time he did, more would come at him, blocking his way. Neji and Hinata were busy dodging and trying to scan, but so far they couldn't see anything just yet. "Damn it, come out here and fight," Naruto shouted out to whoever was doing this. They didn't have the time to play around like this. The more they stayed here, the longer Sasuke was getting away. "Up there," Neji yelled out as a sound ninja with 4 limbs came down from the branches. "I got him," Kiba yelled out, jumping at the boy. Kidomaru smirked as the boy and his dog were falling into his trap. He opened his mouth as a large amount of webbing came out, and suddenly a giant web came flying at Kiba. Kiba had no way to dodge as he and Akamaru were engulfed by it. The webbing attached him to a tree, and no matter how much he struggled, he couldn't break the webbing. Hinata ran to him, but when she stepped on a prepared web wire, it released a web trap this time around. Kidomaru was webbing everyone up as quickly as he could. Although he was outnumbered, it was something he was used to. Plus it wasn't like they could escape his webbing, they would soon learn why when they tried. Wind blade. Temari yelled out as she swept her fan at the enemy. Kitamaru barely managed to dodge the attack, he hadn't counted on a wind user. The webbing was a mixture of chakra and that's what made it so strong. But a precise attack like that might be able to cut it. He would have to deal with her first. You're going to need to level up a lot more than that to beat me, he told the wind kunoichi, disappearing back into the trees. Damn it, where did he go? Naruto asked, looking around. Kakashi looked to Tenten. Cut the others free while we have a break. Tenten nodded as she jumped to Hinata, who was closest. She pulled out a kunai, but when she tried to cut the webbing it wouldn't go through the material. She didn't understand, it shouldn't be that strong, so she tried another on. When that didn't work she pulled out a short sword she had sealed in a scroll. It was one of her sharpest of swords, but even that didn't work. I can't cut through it. Tenten yelled to the Jonin leader. Whatever this crap is, it's resistant to being cut. Don't let him catch you in that, Kakashi warned as the sound ninja kept throwing webs at everyone. Kakashi was trying to come up with a plan for attack. The boy was a distance fighter, but if you got up close that webbing would be a major problem. Temari, try to get rid of the branches, I want him on the ground. Kakashi figured it would limit the boy's mobility if he was stuck on the ground and couldn't hide in the branches. Kitamaru heard this and saw the blonde pulling back her large fan again. He wouldn't let her get another shot off again. He quickly spat out webbing from his mouth and formed it into a special arrow of his. He pulled out a bow as he quickly ran behind the trunk of the tree as Temari's wind attack blasted through the area. Branches were blown away as a large chunk of the forest top was blown away. Temari pulled back for another when Kitamaru used this moment to fire the web arrow. It sailed through the air, and as it was around to hit her, it expanded into a web, ensnaring her into the ground. Temari-chan, Naruto yelled out, running to her. Watch out! Don't touch the web, Temari warned him as he stopped short of touching it. He wanted to cut it, but from what Tenten said he might not be able to. He hated feeling like there was nothing to do. In fact, he refused that there was nothing to be done. There had to be a way of cutting it, he just had to figure it out. He heard a yell and turned to see that Tenten had been caught now. Naruto thought about using wind chakra to cut through it like the stones. It might work, but he had never really used it in a combat condition without Temari's help. Maybe he could hold her hand and use the other to cut through it. It was worth a try at least. He was about to tell her his plan when suddenly he felt something snag the back of his jacket. He was quickly pulled off his feet as a web came out of nowhere, and he was now stuck in midair in the center of a web attached to several trees. Kakashi was the last one left, and he didn't like this. The boy's webbing made him a major problem. Even if he defeated the boy, he had no idea how to free the rest of his team, and for all he knew they could be stuck there for hours they didn't have. Damn, you're a slippery one, Kitamaru stated after another frustrating failure at catching Kakashi. He was also keeping his distance from the man. He knew the reputation from Kakashi, and getting in close would not end well for the sound ninja. He pulled out a bow as he formed an arrow from the webbing he created from his mouth. Dodge this then. The arrow flew, and Kakashi thankfully had pulled up his headband. With his Sharingan he was able to dodge the arrow. It glanced off the shoulder part of his vest, cutting it up slightly. The boy's accuracy was amazing for a boy his age. In fact, he would say that his accuracy rivaled that of Tenten on the team. The boy, he noticed, fire more shots, but they all missed, but only just. Kakashi was being kept at a distance and from starting any counter jutsu. Kakashi also knew that he couldn't use his eye for too long. It was the double edge he always had to deal with when using it. He could never afford to drag out fights, and this boy was trying to drag things out. Kitamaru was getting a little bored with this cat and mouse game with Kakashi. So he decided to play another game. He pulled back a new arrow as he aimed it at all those he had captured. I wonder, are you fast enough to take an arrow for one of your team? Or will you simply just let me shoot them? Now who shall I go for first? When I get out of here I'm going to kick your ass. Naruto shouted out as he struggled in his own web. I think the loud mouth will be first, Kitamaru stated, pointing the weapon at Naruto. Kakashi saw this and cursed as he was on the other side of the opening of the forest. If he ran as fast as he could, he might not make it in time to do anything, and even then, he didn't know what he could do. Maybe deflect the arrow's path, that might work, so he ran as fast as he could, holding out a kunai. Naruto looked up as the arrow was pointed at him. Temari felt like an icy fist just grabbed her heart. She didn't think that Kakashi was going to make it in time. She could take it if it was her that was going to be shot, but she didn't want to see this. She couldn't see this or let it happen. She could only watch in horror as the arrow sailed away. Everything moved in slow motion as she yelled out. It was just when it was about to hit Naruto when a figure came out of nowhere to knock the arrow away with his own fist. Neji stood there over Naruto, his bloodline activated as he looked defiant at Kitamura's surprised look. "Hinata, use the gentle fist to cut the webbing. I'll take this one on," Neji told his cousin. Konoha. In the Hokage's office, Sakura was making herself as useful as she could. She honestly didn't know what else to do. She was worried about her team, for various reasons. Worried that everyone might end up getting hurt or worse, worried for Sasuke and what he was doing. She honestly didn't understand why he was doing this. He was betraying the entire village to go off with the man that had attacked them in the Forest of Death, had nearly killed them, attacked the village and killed the third Hokage. It didn't make any sense, or did it? All this time she had tried to get closer to the boy, to understand him more, but he always shut himself away. What did she know about him other than the public history? She had seen a few moments of kindness in him, a few times he opened up, but that had been before the curse mark changed things. He became darker and seemed to slip further and further away. She sighed to herself as she thought about this. Maybe she hadn't known him all that well if he was willingly going to leave for Orochimaru. She felt a sting where that girl had hit her earlier. That was another thing as well. He had chosen that girl to be with, that is, if she told the truth about what she did with Sasuke. The fact that Sasuke didn't even react to her claim didn't sit well with Sakura. "Sakura," Tsunade's voice called out. Coming, Sakura gathered up the few scrolls she had been sent to get across the room and gave them to the fifth. Tsunade took the files as she looked them over before speaking. "Don't worry, they'll be fine." Sakura looked up in surprise as Tsunade looked up slightly herself with a grin on her face. "It's written all over your face. You always wear your emotions in plain sight. Piece of advice, don't go into poker." Sakura felt a little of the weight on her shoulders ease from the Hokage's slight humor. "I worry as well, you know." Tsunade eased back in her chair as she placed the papers down. "You can't stop what is to come, you have to learn how to take what comes at you in life." She looked up at her office. "I wish I could say I did just that, but that would make a liar out of me." Tsunade-sama. Sakura had never seen the Hokage looking like this. Although Tsunade looked young, Sakura felt like the image of the woman in front of her had just aged, and yet she still looked like normal. The woman seemed to be remembering something that weighed so much it nearly crushed her for a moment. "I lost my little brother and I nearly lost myself, when Dan died. I did. I ran from my pain and I just couldn't face the world anymore." Tsunade then smiled. "Amazing how some loud-mouthed little brat of a genin could get me to face it all and to have the strength to fight again." Sakura smiled herself. "Naruto is unique." That made Tsunade laugh. "That's putting it gently. But that's why I believe in them, and so should you. He had a way of beating the odds." Before they could say more, there was a knock on the door. Tsunade told them to enter as a Chunin entered the room. "Tsunade-sama, Shizune's medical team just left to help the retrieval team as support." Tsunade nodded. "Good, you can leave now." Tsunade sighed when the Chunin left. It was good that Shizune got her medical team set up so quickly. Now she just hoped that her apprentice could get there in time if Kakashi's team needed any medical help. It was too bad that they couldn't organize it sooner, but time wasn't on their side. It still wasn't. She hated waiting. She was not a patient person and it got on her nerves waiting around. She stood up suddenly. If she was stuck waiting around, she would at least get something productive done. "Come with me, Sakura." "Where are we going?" the young girl asked. "Training," Tsunade said simply. "We might as well get in some training while we wait." She saw the girl's nervous look. "Don't worry, it's not physical training today. That will be tomorrow. Today is basic medical knowledge." Retrieval team. Hinata was finishing cutting through the webbing of the last member of the team as Neji was facing the sound ninja. She wished she had thought of it, to use the gentle fist to cut the webbing. Using her eyes she could see the chakra inside of the webbing, and her clan's style of combat would be the perfect counter for this. Her hands in the shape of a knife cut through the webbing as the chakra in her hand was formed to cut through the chakra in the webbing, it cut through it effortlessly. "Thanks," Kiba told her with a small smile as he got up. Hinata nodded her head as they went to the others. Kakashi had time to think but only for a moment. They could all rush this ninja but he was a slippery one. Plus he was using delaying tactics as well, something they couldn't afford to do at all. Which meant they would have to split up again. He knew that Anko would be coming, so if the team could hold out until she got here then it wouldn't be so bad. The webbing was another issue, only the Hyuga could cut it, which meant only Hinata or Neji would have to be behind and he might need one of them for later. Given the experience of this ninja it would have to be Neji. Hinata was at the moment no match for him and he needed to ensure whoever was left behind had the odds to survive. "Neji, I want you to deal with him while we go on," Kakashi told him. "What, we can kick his ass, Kakashi-sensei," Naruto said to the Jonin leader. "He's right, Naruto," Temari told him. "This guy is just trying to delay us and he'll just keep webbing members up, making Hinata and Neji take time out to free them, and then we have to dodge." It was all a cat and mouse game and she knew it. She could use her fan to blast the area, but using such high-level moves too many times would leave her drained, and they still had who knew how many more ahead of them. Plus there was no telling what other surprises he had. "I'll stay with him," Tenten said to everyone's surprise. "Neji is a short-range fighter and I can attack at long range. Plus we've trained together enough to work well as a team." Kakashi nodded his head. It made sense, and they were Guy's students. Knowing the kind of training he put himself through and Lee, there was no telling what those two had been through. He would have liked to leave Temari as well, but he might need her for later. He had a feeling that they would only get to the stronger opponents as they moved on and she would be needed. "All right, you two say and fight him. Help should be coming and catch up when you can," Kakashi told them. "Everyone, move out," he ordered as they made a break for it. Kidomaru saw this from his hiding spot as he pulled an arrow back in his bow. He didn't like the fact they were splitting up, but he could at least try to take one of the out. He aimed for the blonde girl with the fan. She might be trouble later on. He let the arrow go, but he hadn't counted on one thing. That was Tenten's deadly accuracy with Neji's warning. Neji saw the arrow and quickly told Tenten. In under a second the weapons expert's eyes were already tracking the arrow. She didn't need any longer. Her hand threw out a kunai naturally in almost a blur as the small weapon sailed through the air. Kidomaru smirked. No one was that good. Sure, he was that accurate, but no one else matched him. To his surprise, the kunai not only hit the arrow but knocked it slightly off course. The arrow just went over Temari's head, who looked back in shock as she felt something brush against her hair. "You owe me one," Tenten shouted to the former sand ninja. It felt kind of good to get one up on her. Sure, she had forgiven the girl for her lose in the Chunin exams, but still. There was some perverse sense of pleasure in Tenten that Temari owed now. Tenten looked to the trees as it was just her and Neji now. "Well, here we are." Neji nodded. "I'll point him out." "And I take him out," Tenten smirked. "I have just the thing I've been saving." She pulled out a scroll as Neji knew it was one of her many weapon scrolls she kept on her person. She unsealed her choice of weapons and he was surprised to see a bow with a quiver of arrows. "I didn't know you had those," Neji said to her, surprised as he scanned the area. "There's a lot you don't know," she smirked, arming herself. "I got this after the exams. I figured I needed to round out my weapons more and got a bunch of special arrows as well." Neji lifted a single eyebrow at the word special, knowing her it might be something very nasty for the enemy. Kidomaru had to admit, he was impressed with the girl. No one had done something like that to him, ever. To do that to one of his arrows, he was intrigued, but his girl, the boy less so, but she was obviously at a good level. This game might have just increased in difficulty for him. 4 o'clock, 63 degrees up, Neji said. Tenten didn't miss a beat as she took aim and fired. Kidomaru saw the arrow coming. He moved as fast as he could. He felt the arrow grave his cheek and swore. That was way too close. It had nearly been game over for him right there. Against Neji would give out his location and Tenten would fire her own arrow. Kitamaru figured it was time to change the game up a little. He called up some chakra for his summoning creature. He had side with the spiders of course, and a large spider creature was called. The spider was huge, easy. Its body was 7 feet long and that didn't even count the legs as it took a spot in the branches. I don't like the looks of this, Tenten said looking up at the huge animal with disgust. I really hate spiders. Suddenly the spider spawned a literal army of smaller ones, each one carrying a web line on itself as they descended en masse towards them. Oh crap, Tenten muttered as she pulled her scroll again. This time she unsealed a large number of shurikens. She easily held the deadly little things between all her fingers as she quickly tried to judge the right angle for attack. Neji was ready as well, although he would have to wait for them to get closer. Tenten threw her weapons, each one hitting a spider dead center. She cleared a safe area for herself knowing that Neji would be able to handle himself and she didn't want to get in his way. She saw his arms moving with blinding speed, attacking all the little things that came too close to his area of attack. That was a good opening move, Kitamaru said as he slowly lowered himself. But how long can you keep this up? I doubt she has a limitless supply of weapons and sooner or later you'll both start to miss. Tenten and Neji knew that. They looked at each other as they silently needed a plan. Tenten's eyes went quickly to the large spider as she nodded at him. He looked at Kitamaru and he too nodded. They had perfect teamwork as they had trained with each other for nearly 2 years now. Tenten took out a special kunai with a paper bomb wrapped around it. Neji noticed the different color on it and got ready. Tenten threw the kunai straight up and closed her eyes, as did Neji. It was a risk but one they needed. The bomb exploded in a bright light as the paper flash bomb went off. Kitamaru hadn't known what the girl was doing and now he was blinded. Tenten jumped onto a tree as she quickly unsealed a large battle axe. It would slow her down but she needed the extra weight. When she reached the highest point she jumped off and in a backflip was now landing on top of the spider. The blinded creature heard the girl but didn't know the danger until it was too late. Tenten's axe smashed into its head. It gave a gurgled sound as it fell from the trees. It landed with a large crash into the floor below, blood seeping formed the mortal wound. Neji rushed at Kitamaru and managed to hit him with several dozen good hits from his gentle fist. Kitamaru cried out as he landed on the ground. Neji stood in front of the boy as Tenten landed beside him. Nice one, Tenten smiled. Neji however was still tense. Something was wrong as Kitamaru started to get up. It wasn't possible. He had made sure those were mortal hits. Then he noticed something odd. The places he had hit looked strangely orange. It reminded him of Lee's fight with Gaara, how the boy had an outer shell that protected him. Damn, can it be that he has something similar? That was a good one, Kitamaru stated getting up. It's a good thing that the webbing I use I can make from any liquid in my body. My spit is just one way, I can sweat it out of my pores as well. To show this was true, the damaged pieces fall off his body as a new substance seemed to grow over it, and then when it settled looked just like his real skin. Just like Gaara, Neji confirmed. Tenten heard this and knew this wouldn't be an easy fight now. Kitamaru once again took to trees as he decided to keep his distance. The battle continued on like this. Kitamaru would keep his distance trying to get through their defenses and they would counterattack. Tenten would sometimes try to put a paper bomb onto her arrow and one of the explosions nearly did get Kitamaru. He knew that his armor might protect him physically, but the shockwave of an explosion was something else as that could cause internal damage. But as the battle went on, both Tenten and Neji wouldn't be able to keep up with all the weapons that kept coming at them. Cuts would start to form. At one point a kunai hit Tenten in her shin. This caused a lot of pain as she couldn't move as much. Neji had to jump to her aid when the next bombardment of weapons came. Tenten got hit in the shoulder but Neji had taken 3 kunai himself. Both were wounded and bleeding but neither one was backing down. It was starting to drag out for too long for Kitamaru. He knew that he couldn't afford to waste much time with these two. He needed to get back before more of Konoha's forces could be gathered up. It was time to finally end this and drew on the power of the curse mark. The black markings grew over his body but he didn't stop there. He wanted to crush them utterly. He wanted a complete victory as he put himself through the next stage. His skin changed color as he started to take on a more demonic appearance, and a third eye grew in the middle of his forehead. This new eye allowed him to increase his accuracy, and now he would see just how good these two were. Neji caught this new arrow weapon and was only just able to dodge it as it cut along his arm. He hissed out as a large gash was formed. "Neji, are you okay?" Tenten asked, seeing the weapon and now his arm covering itself in blood. "I'm fine," he told her. Although he could still use the arm that had been a surprise to him, he wouldn't be caught off guard like that again. Kitamaru cursed. He really didn't like how that boy could see all his attacks coming. The girl, on the other hand, she couldn't. A grin slowly spread across his face as he took aim. She was now too far for the boy to stop the arrow, and she was slowed down with that leg wound. She couldn't be fast enough to dodge or get out of way. Tenten saw the arrow coming at her, and with only one arrow left herself. She knew that she only had one chance. Her body was already injured, so it was slower now, but she forced herself to move as fast as she could. She took aim and fired her last arrow. It grazed along its edge, knotting its course but not far enough. She cried out, feeling the arrow pierce her lower torso. She felt it go through her body and into the tree she was leaning against. No. Neji saw Tenten impaled onto the tree, but he couldn't move to her. He saw the kunai coming at him again now. He wanted to make sure she was okay, but that arrow had looked like it had been a lethal blow. A moment's distraction led to more cuts onto his body. He felt the blade slice into his flesh and two more sink into him. When there was a break, he stood there on unsteady feet. His body was heavily wounded. He knew he was losing too much blood. His head was getting lightheaded, a bad sign that his blood pressure was dropping. He didn't want to think of the internal damage. Kitamaru slowly lowered himself a few feet from Neji, hanging upside down. "You're on death's door now. Your little friend is a goner and you'll be joining her soon enough. Oh well, I'll have to admit you two were a nice little game for me. But you can't pierce my form with her weapons, and I'm not getting close enough for you to use those hand against me. Not that you could do much anyway. You can barely stand now. You shouldn't have taken those hits for her." "I would do so again no matter what," Neji told him as he slowly turned to face him. "She's my teammate and I would never abandon my allies. Besides, there is still one way to beat you." "Oh," Kitamaru smirked, hanging a few feet in the air. He figured he was safe at this distance. There was no way Neji could jump this high up at him. "I'm interested in hearing that. You said it yourself. Your own arrows are made of the same material as that armor you use on your skin," Neji smirked. Kitamaru looked confused at him when he heard the sound of an arrow. He was about to move when suddenly he felt something slam into the back of his head. He was confused what happened at first and why he couldn't see out of his third eye anymore. He felt this intense pain, then his vision blurred. The last thing he saw was the ground coming up to him before everything went dark. Neji looked at the monstrous form of their enemy with one of his own arrows sticking out of the third eye. The boy's body slowly started to revert to his more human appearance, looking out at the world with dead eyes. Neji looked up to see Tenten sitting down holding the bleeding wound from where she had pulled the arrow out from. Neji slowly made his way to her as he nearly collapsed next to her. "Are you okay?" he said in a soft voice. He was tired and hurting all over. Tenten winced as she tried to put pressure on the wound. "Been better. Knew I couldn't dodge. Had to make it hit somewhere, not vital although I think it hit a kidney, not sure." Tenten was starting to look slightly pale to Neji. "Hold on," he said, trying to get comfortable next to her. That was hard when he had a few kunai in his back, so he was on his side next to her. He held his own hand to her wound, trying to stop as much bleeding as he could. "I feel so tired," Tenten whispered. "Samaya, but we can't sleep. You know that," Neji said to her as she pressed her body against his. Tenten knew their chances of survival were pretty low with their wounds, but she was a ninja. She knew the risks. Although knowing that this could be the end, she felt scared. She had so much she wanted to do in life. There was so much she hadn't done yet either. Feeling Neji pressed against her felt nice. At least she wasn't alone. That was worse way to go. She felt alone. "Don't leave me," she muttered out loud her thoughts. Neji wasn't sure what she meant. It wasn't like he was going anywhere. "I'll never leave." She smiled a bit as he eyes closed. "Good, I'm glad it's you." Neji had no idea what she meant before he felt his tired body give out. He slipped into darkness, but he was left with one strange thought. You would think that his last thoughts would be of the others, their mission or his family. But strangely his last thoughts were, "I'm glad it's you too," before everything went black. They lay there for who knew how long, and they weren't aware of a shadow of a person that suddenly loomed over their forms.